Hi, it's Ileana here today at Awakening Cosmic Reality Show, and I have Grant Cameron with us here. He is a researcher from Canada. He just recently wrote a beautiful book called Contact Modalities, and it is about getting in contact with different beings. So, Grant, can you tell us about your work a little bit and the book as well?
Okay, well, it all starts for me back in 1975. I have an interest in sort of paranormal stuff, but no interest in anything UFO or anything like that. I live in Manitoba, which is just above the North Dakota border, and there was a bunch of sightings were being reported in a small town called Carmen, Manitoba. And I said to my friends, we used to drive around the city, and I said, well, instead of driving around the city, why don't we go out to this town and see what everybody's looking at? And my friend said, okay, we'll go. That was February of 1975. And we never went. We didn't go till 3 months later when a local TV station, a CKY TV here, captured the thing jumping off the ground. And at that point, it sort of went viral in the city in Winnipeg. And that's when we went. And I always describe it as buying the lottery ticket. You know, there's a chance you can win, but you know you're not going to win. You're not going to see anything. And we went out there, we drove around for an hour. We didn't see anything. And my friend said, okay, we'll drive into the Carmen one more time. If we don't see anything, let's go home. I said, fantastic. This has been a total waste of time. We turned the car to go back in and the thing flew. It wasn't in the sky. It was down low. It was not a light in the sky. It flew right in front of the car down, I don't know, maybe half a mile down the road, very, very low, bobbing up and down like a red plasma type object. And the rest of my friends all sort of went on with their lives. I took people on tours out there because this thing was there quite a bit. And so I sort of just went crazy. I couldn't get enough of this. And then what happened was I had gone and interviewed all the people in this town and the surrounding towns, what they had seen and stuff like that. And in those days, it was a bit different. There was no discussion like there is today about abductions were very rare. Travis Walton hadn't even been abducted yet, and none of that stuff was going on. So it was basically a lot of sightings, a lot of ground traces, which don't happen anymore. Haven't happened for 25 years, where things would land on the ground and burn out a crop or something like that and leave these tripod marks. That hasn't happened for 25 years. Those were going on then. So I gathered all this stuff together and I tried to get it published, and nobody wanted to talk to me about it. Or, I mean, people would talk about it, but nobody wanted to publish it. And there's a local publisher said to me, basically changed my life. She said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. I went, whoa, I couldn't believe it. It's like, I thought this is the biggest story of all times. And I had captured it and it was a local story and everybody knew about it, but she didn't want to touch it. So it was at that point, my father worked for the Department of Transport in Canada. He was a pilot. And one of the people in his office had actually worked for the Canadian government when they were investigating flying saucers, when they used to call them flying saucers back in the early 1950s. And he said, if you really want to know what's going on, you should study what the Canadian government was doing from 1950 to 54. I worked for this guy, Wilbert Smith, who he thought was totally crazy. And Wilbert Smith was a contactee. So again, you have to go back to 1975, that in 1975, you absolutely never would identify yourself as a contactee, that you were talking to aliens. It was bad enough that you'd seen a UFO, let alone that you talked to beings. So we kept this very secret that Wilbur was a contactee and he was dealing with an alien by the name of Alpha. And so I went and I interviewed, by that time, Wilbur Smith was dead. I went to interview his wife. And that started a pattern of trying to answer a question. The second night that I had a sighting, first night it flew right in front of the car. Second night it flew right at us, the second night, and came in fairly close. Again, it was very low to the ground. It started as one object and it changed into a different object. It was bouncing around the sky as this sort of a flashing white thing. And it turned into this sort of red thing that I'd seen the first night. And it was just flying away. It sort of changed my life because I was looking at it and I'm going, so what's it doing? It's like, it's not doing anything. It's just flying along. And all my life, I've always said that. So when people say they saw a UFO, I always say, so what was it doing? And they always say the same thing. I don't know. It was just there. And I was like, and I said, well, do you think it was there by accident or how long was it there? Oh, a couple seconds. Just wanted me to see it. And then it flies off. And I got that impression many years later. I didn't figure it out at first. And I'm thinking, maybe they wanted me out because the way this film had been taken by CKY was very, very weird how they got the film. They should never have gotten the film. And anyway, I started on this pursuit of trying to figure out what are they doing? Like, what is this thing? And at that time I thought it was ET, and I started this pursuit to try to go after the Canadian government. the former president of Penn State University, who had 14 honorary doctorate degrees. And it was a big engineering college, and he knew what was going on. He's playing games with us. And then I went after the president of the United States. I went after the top CIA people. And all I wanted to know is, like, I'm a little Canadian guy here. I don't know what's going on, but somebody's got to know what's going on here. Somebody's got to know what this phenomenon is. Not everybody's stupid. So I tried to find the highest level person I could find. And then what happened, I did that for many, many years until 2012. In 2012, I had actually pulled out of ufology when my kid was sort of playing hockey. We spent a lot of time playing hockey. So I really didn't do anything for many years. And then I got back into this conference. It was the World Ufo Congress, which was being held first in Laughlin, and then it moved to Phoenix. So I'm in Phoenix, and Colin Andrews, the famous crop circle guy, was lecturing. And that was where everything changed for me. So I didn't want to go to the lecture, almost like the UFO thing. I didn't want to go in there. No interest in crop circles, no interest in any of this kind of stuff. And I said, well, there's a big time lecture. I should go pay him respect. And that's when the contact modality thing started. So I went in the room, and I really didn't want to be in the room. I had no interest in what he was talking about. And I was just sort of sitting there, and I was sort of thinking about, I should go across the river to the library. Maybe I should go for coffee. And I wasn't thinking about what he was talking about. And it's one of the contact modalities that I talk about in the book is called daydreaming, where what you're doing is you're zoning out, you're shutting down your rational analytical mind, which creates a rip in the filter, and you can walk into the field. And so that's what was happening. I was zoning out. I was daydreaming, and he was talking about consciousness and crop circles. And what his theory was that the intelligence was, they were doing 20% of the crop circles were for real, and the other 80% were hoax, but they're also made by the aliens. The aliens were telling the hoaxers what to put down. And that was the whole lecture. So this is the lecture, and he's talking about consciousness. And I always make the joke that in 2012, I could not have spelled consciousness, and I couldn't have cared less. I had no interest whatsoever. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and all of a sudden, three things come into my head instantaneously, all at the same time. They happen, and if you've had this kind of experience, so you know what this is like. And the difference between a rational analytical thought and this, it's when you get into mystical experiences where people will talk about the fact that it's noetic. It comes with absolute certainty. It comes with this knowledge that this is reality. This is not just a good idea. And that's where it came. It was like, oh, that's how it works. It was like this thing I was thinking, what's it doing in 1975? What was it doing? And what's this all about? And it was basically saying to me, the answer to your question is consciousness. And the three things it put in my head were three things. One, when I had started the Canadian government early on, I had gone after the wife of the guy, and I got some of the files and stuff. And this whole thing where he was a contactee, and he had gone to the Americans. He was a high-level Canadian guy. He was actually running what I guess it'd be like the NSA in Canada. He was trying to pick off Russian communications. He was the head radio engineer in Canada. And he was running this top secret thing outside of Ottawa where they were trying to intercept Russian communications. And so he had gone to the United States. He had very high security clearance. And he, like me, was very curious. So he went down there and he started asking questions about flying saucers. And he said, I discovered that there was something to it. There was a lot of smoke, which meant there had to be some fire. And he wrote this memo where he talked to the Americans, and the Americans had told the Canadians, and these are American officials. These aren't just people on the street. American officials told me that flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject. But the one line that came into my head when I had this noetic experience was, he said, we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. And that was in my head. It was like, oh, mental phenomena. And that was, if people know the history of the UFO thing, there was no aliens appeared until the detonation of the hydrogen bomb in 1952. A couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb, that's when Adamski and Williamson had this encounter with this being in the California desert. And so nobody in 1950 was talking to aliens. There was nobody claiming they were talking to aliens or there was aliens. They knew there was flying saucers, but they didn't know what was in them. And so that came into my head, mental phenomena. I'm thinking, how did the Americans know the mental phenomena was part of the UFO thing if nobody talked to an alien? Because now we know that there may have been a live alien that had been, captured, and that this alien was talking in people's heads and stuff. Well, we know now that telepathy is part, but nobody knew in 1950 that telepathy was part of the UFO thing. That was the first thing. The second thing was, I said we'd chased around this Dr. Eric Walker, who was the chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, top military think tank in the United States. And he was head of Penn State University for 15 years and 14 honorary doctorate degrees, co-developer of the homing torpedo, very, very powerful guy in the United States. And during one conversation, we were talking to him, and a guy from Great Britain was interviewing him, and he said, Mr. Walker, let me ask you, is the MJ-12 group, the group that's controlling it, is it all still Americans? Is it still just 12 guys? And he said, hey, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy goes, I don't know. It's like, and he says, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in by the control group. Very few people understand how it works. So that came into my head. So there's this mental phenomena the Canadians were talking about. Eric Walker talks about ESP. And then in 1993, Jan Harson, who was the director of MUFON at one point, he's attending a lecture at UCLA. And Ben Rich, who's rumored to be running the back engineering program at Lockheed Skunk Works on the UFO stuff, is giving a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, he says, we've now got the technology to take ET home. And Jan Hartson had experience when he was 9 years old in the backyard with this flying saucer, and he was obsessed his whole life. He wanted to find out how they got here, how the propulsion system worked. So he goes running after Ben as he's leaving the building, and he said, Ben, I need to know. My whole life I've been fascinated with UFOs. Like, how do they get here? How does the propulsion system work? And Ben turns around and says, let me ask you a question. Exactly the same question that Walker had asked in 1991. This is 1993. He said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan Hartson says, it means everything in time and space is connected. He said, that's how it works. He gets in his car and drives away. So that changed everything for me in terms of this whole contact modality thing. And then there's a connected part that the other guy doesn't really talk about, and that's if you've ever done the free survey, the Edgar Mitchell survey of the 3,000 experiencers, the guy who co-developed that thing with Edgar Mitchell is Ray Hernandez. And what happened, I had the experience in February 26, 2012. That's when I have this download experience, this noetic experience in Phoenix. And it's exactly the same day or a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, Chris Bledsoe, who's very, very famous experiencer, has this encounter in 2007. But in 2012, the same time I have that download experience, he has an encounter with what he calls the lady in light, where he gets pulled by the beings who are now etheric beings with hoods on, and they take him to this woman who's gives him this message about the world and what's you're a messenger and you've got to carry this message and it's your job to carry the message and stuff. And that happens at the same time. The other thing happens that Ray Hernandez, a week after, this happens in the first week of March 2012, a week after I have my download experience, Ray Hernandez tells the story. His wife is having all these contacts. And he's an atheist and he doesn't really believe this stuff. And his wife's all religious. And it's like, I don't really want anything to do with this. But he gets woken. His wife wakes him up. The dog is 15 years old. It's paralyzed. And the dog gets healed. I'll make a long story short. The dog gets healed. And he's like, what is going on here? And he sees this. She calls him down. He goes down there and there's this beam, this bar of light floating around in the living room. And she said that she thought it was Jesus. Said, oh, Jesus healed the dog. And the dog lived for a whole nother year. And actually they put the dog down and there's really nothing wrong with the dog. And he said, I can't figure out why we actually put the dog down. But it was 16 years old at that time. And it was like a brand new puppy. It was running around. It had been paralyzed. It was, they were going to euthanize the thing the next day. And that happened a week after mine. And then what happens is Ray is now he's interested in this whole thing and he's trying to figure out what's going on here. And he's standing outside his house and he says, okay, if this is for real, I want to see one of these things that my wife sees with the stained glass windows. And he's an IRS attorney, a big high level IRS attorney. And he's sitting there and nothing happens. And then 15 minutes later, he sort of looks over and he looks like Wembley Stadium over the next door neighbor's house. And now he's absolutely down the rabbit hole. He just can't get enough of this stuff. And he starts going on the internet. And because I had started to give him my consciousness lectures, because I believe that this thing now consciousness was the basis of this thing, he contacts me and because he puts in consciousness and UFOs, and of course my name comes up. So he contacts me and he says, I need to know. I said, like, something's going on here. You can make contact. You can interact with this thing. I need to know what's going on here. And I said, well, I'm going to go to a lecture in Florida where he lives. And I said, come to the lecture and we'll have a talk. So he brings his wife there. She doesn't really want to talk about anything. And she just basically walks away. He tells his story at the contact meeting at the UFO conference that's going on there. And then he goes back and he leaves back to go over to his house on Sunday. And I think it's Tuesday morning. He's driving down the Miami freeway. And this is where the contact modality thing comes from. He's driving down there and he's stuck in a traffic jam. It's completely gridlocked. He stopped. He's listening to NPR radio, and he says all of a sudden, boom, he's out of his car, and he's up in wherever he's like an out of body experience. He's been pulled, and he's being shown this wheel, and the wheel is spinning, and on the wheel it has everything. It has remote viewing, remote viewing, UFOs, quantum physics, consciousness, and consciousness is in the middle. And they're saying you got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing, and consciousness is in the middle. And that's where he comes up with the concept of contact modalities. So because I had the experience happen to me, the same as him, is once you have an experience like this, then you start to chase it, and you start. So when I had the download experience, I was calling them downloads then. When I had the download experience, I sort of basically said, boy, I wonder if anybody else had one of these. So I would put in download, and then the first thing that came up was Paul McCartney from the Beatles had gotten the song Yesterday, the most produced song of the 20th century, in a dream in the middle of the night. Oh, that's pretty cool. And I started looking, I started realizing like I wasn't the only one that was having these experiences. Albert Einstein, the theory of relativity. He was in a toboggan in a dream. He's going down the hill. And he actually said, I realized I had to remember that dream. In fact, you could say, and I would say, that my entire career was based on a meditation on that dream. So I started to realize there was all these people were getting these modalities, these different ways to get in the field and get inventions and all this kind of stuff. And I realized, okay, I've got to sort of work on this. And that's where I made a whole shift from 2012. A lot of the UFO community really doesn't have much to do with me anymore, because I think I've sort of lost it. And they're still into the nuts and bolts. Let's count how many red objects are on the sky and green ones, and how fast are they moving, and all this kind of stuff. And they're still in the sort of the nuts and bolts idea of how the universe works. And I realized that no, you can actually get in this field. And then Ray Hernandez wanted me to do an article for the second book. Their first book came out talking about the survey they'd done with the experiencers. They were going to do a second book, and they wanted me to do a thing on contact modalities. So I really didn't know what I was going to, you procrastinate, you don't really start the article. So at one point I said, okay, I'll get all the modalities and I'll write them all down, and then that'll start me on the article. So I thought there'd be maybe 20 of them. And I had over 70 contact modalities, and I started to realize, like, oh man. So I started filling them in, and next thing you know, it was a book. And sort of that was how it basically started in terms of the book. And the basic concept is that I concluded at the end of the book was that everything's in the field. For example, if you look at people who are UFO experiencers, 40% of them will say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. People who have near-death experience say the same thing. So then the question is, like, everything's in the field. All the answers, everything's in the field. And it's the ability to get in the field. That's the concept. And some people can do it. And it's whether you're a medium or a channeler or whatever, like it's like music. There are people who can play music, and then there are prodigies, there are musical professionals. And so it doesn't mean because you're one that you're good at it, but people can do it. And the basic concept came down was it's the ability to shut down the rational analytical left brain, the male brain that believes in separation, believes in fighting, believes in all this kind of nonsense, and shift over. And if you can, through meditation, quiet the left brain down, or hypnosis, or whatever technique you have, some people can do this. And so the important thing to me then was not so much, filing sightings and stuff. It was to find these people who had been in the field, find these people and the experiencers or whatever, that if they're in the field, then you can say to them, okay, ask them this question. And I would do this with people. Ask them this, ask them this. And you're trying to get answers because they've been in the field. They know how to do it. And so that's the whole concept of contact modality. There are people who can get in the field. You just got to find them. So you should be spending your time with people who are, I call the experiencers, the people who are in there, rather than all this other stuff, which doesn't get you anywhere. Because almost like Albert Einstein said, you cannot solve a problem using the same information that you use to create the problem. And that's what we're doing. We're taking, even I was told in one of my noetic experiences, it's called wrong blocks. You've got all these blocks and you think all your blocks are correct. In fact, most of your blocks are wrong, and you're shuffling them around. The world is flat. We're at the center of the universe, and wrong block. And you're shuffling all these blocks around thinking you're going to solve the problem, and you're not solving anything. All you're doing is moving these wrong blocks. Mm-hmm. And it's only when you get in the field can you get a new block. And that's when you get paranormal stuff, when you get weird stuff, that tells you something's wrong. And if you can figure out what that person's got, it will give you a new piece of information that will help you understand how does the world actually work.
Mm-hmm. And I think I had a bit of a ET contact in how I an ET told me to contact you, and that's how I contacted you. And it was very interesting. So to put it
and then you
mildly.
do get that synchronicity thing. People always have this thing about synchronicity of how the more I see it, the more I believe that you are, whether it's your higher self or whatever, you're sort of being guided. And I had a second really dramatic not near death, a noetic experience in 2017. I think it was, I'm not even sure what year it was. I think it was 2017. And that is, again, is the zoning out is the one that seems to work for me, where I'm walking. I do a lot of walking. So I'm walking downtown, which is about 6 miles, take a couple of hours, and I'm walking along, and all of a sudden the information starts to come to me, and I'm writing this stuff down. And the stuff they gave me there, I think, was more important. Eventually I'll do a book on it, but it basically spelled out this idea that the one we were talking about now is the one they said, if it's one life, if you only live one time, well, that's one world and it has certain rules. But if it's multiple lives, if you live multiple times, then everything is going to change. All the rules change, everything. And the same thing they said, is the world random? If it's random, that's one world. But if it's pattern, that's a whole different world. Is it made out of nuts and bolts? Is the world made out of nuts and bolts? That's one world. But if it's made out of consciousness, it's a different world. So it comes down to this idea of multiple lives. If it's multiple lives, then you and I agreed to come into the world to do something. And then you start getting into the thing about, you have a near-death experience, or like, for example, of the experiencers that Free did, 37% of them had near-death experiences. So you're going, is that a random? I mean, how is it possible that somebody can be, say, an abductee or an experiencer, and at the same time have near-death experience? And it's like, well, it's not random. You planned this. You came in to plan this kind of stuff. And so you see the world completely differently once you get it down. But as long as you have all these false things, like believing it's one life, believing it's made out of nuts and bolts, these kind of things. And I was given 24 different things. And basically it said to me, not only have you got it wrong, it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. Or they even called me ego boy at one time. They said, you're an ignorant, arrogant little piece of fill in the blank. You think you understand what's going on. You haven't got a clue what's going on. And that's true. The more I look at it, the more I realize that the world gets more and more complex. And yet we still are in a world where you come in and we make agreements to interact with each other, to do certain things. And so people will always want to play the victim role, like I'm a victim of the government or whatever. And yet you, in a multiple life universe, you and I both chose to come in at this time, in this place, in the middle of whatever mess we find ourselves in. And we probably came for a reason. So own it, live with it, and do what you've got to do, because you're the one that's got the players on the stage. Or the other concept that was really important to me was the idea that it just sort of dawned on me the other day. I'm reading a quote by Whitley Strieber, whose wife Anne died, and he's famous for writing the book Communion. And his wife actually did the channeling. In the middle of the night, she started to talk in her sleep, and she said, no, we're not. He was going to call it Body Pain, the book. And he said, no, we're not going to call it Body Pain. We're going to call it Communion, because that's what it is. And that's why this famous book called Communion, that got 200,000 letters. And she dies a couple of years ago, and she leaves him a message which says to him, critically important if you understand what she's saying. She's saying, Whitley, I am no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you. And that's the idea that we are playing a character on a stage, but we are not the character on the stage. We make this mistake that believing that we are human beings and they are aliens and we are actually here. And after 70 years, then we die, and it's dust to dust, ashes to ashes. We don't realize it's like, remember who you actually are. You are not the character on the stage. You are playing a character on the stage. And when you leave the stage, you go to a different character. And so the beings are playing a character. We're playing a character. We're all etheric beings, part of the spark of the divine. And you've got to remember this whole thing, but we get sort of swept up in being human and all this kind of stuff, that we make these fatal errors. And we, as they described to me, you take these wrong blocks and you start building a world out of these wrong blocks, and you're totally out to lunch as to what's going on.
But even from failed blocks, you learn something interesting all the time. I believe that nothing is ever a failure. Even if it didn't turn out the way you thought it would, it's still, you learn something from it, very important. You learn a lesson, a consciousness lesson.
Oh yeah. Well, everything's experience. But if you go back to 1492, I mean, your world, you live in whatever world you create.
Yeah.
But if you take a look in 1492, where it was believed that, the suns were not, stars were not suns, and we, burned a guy at the stake for that, and that we're the center of the universe. And it's all these sort of things that the way you progress is to move and to figure out, especially with that's why the paranormal stuff is so important. That when a person is doing something paranormal, doesn't mean that they're evil, they're bad, they're stupid, they're deluded or whatever. It means they're doing something that if you figure out what they're doing, that will give you a piece of evidence as to what you're making a false assumption. So we sort of build on these false assumptions. We have to live with what we're doing, but I don't think people realize how much material they have that is absolutely wrong. And in today's world, people really don't have the, I was even thinking about it this morning, people have almost no ability to discern today because there's so much material. And I do a lot, I now don't, because of COVID, I don't do so much volunteering, but I used to do volunteering a lot, and I'd go on bus, because to me it was like, get on the bus and you go around and you volunteer for a couple of hours and you come back, whatever. And on the bus, everybody would be doing the same thing. I don't really use my phone, but everybody on the phone, and they're going, they're going, and you could tell they're going through Facebook, and they're just zip, and everybody on the bus has got their phone, and they're doing this sort of stuff. And that's what people do, is they just sort of read the story, on to the next story, read the story, on to the next story, read the story, on to the next story. And nobody's really thinking. They're just sort of picking up this material, and they're just sort of like a cork in the stream, and they're sort of being bobbed around by whatever's going on. And because of that environment where we're trying to make a living, we're trying to raise our kids, we're trying to take kids to soccer practice and stuff, nobody really has time to actually try to figure out what's going on. Like, nobody ever really thinks about, why am I here? Like, what's going on? It's not until someone says you only got 3 months to live, and they go, oh my God, what's going on? Like, oh, whatever, what's life all about? And nobody really spends that. They sort of ignore that kind of problem. Whereas you and I think, basically I spend almost 24 hours a day thinking about this kind of stuff. And that's maybe because of the way I was raised. I was very religious when I was young. I was supposed to be a minister and stuff like that. So I was always on this thing about, why are we here, what's going on, and that kind of stuff. And where I don't follow religion as much anymore, except that I go across different religions. But that's where it changed for me, where I suddenly spent a lot of time. But I realized that most people are just too busy, or people will say, why doesn't the media follow this thing? And I say, because if you've actually dealt with the media, they've got, like, I'm doing a story today, I got this story to do tomorrow, I got another story to do the next day. They just don't have the time to actually investigate anything, same as most people don't have time. So they just sort of go along with whatever is given them. And as a society, we have to, if you and I have the information, it's like they said, too much is given, much is expected. So we are put the material out there, and we try to sort of move the consciousness of the world a little bit in the way, and it really doesn't matter what happens, whether it's good, bad, because in the reincarnation world, there's no good or bad. It's all experience. So everything is just shifting along, and you go along and learn from what you've got. And I always say, and people sometimes get upset, I say, even if we destroy the world, I mean, that doesn't matter. I mean, we're going to go someplace else and learn the lesson. And that's actually what the Canadians were told. The Canadians were told by AFA, who was the alien that had come, and a thing that a lot of experiencers are told is that they're not really here to save us. They're here to save the world. They're here that we don't blow up the world with nuclear weapons. And what AFA had said is the only time we will ever step in to interfere is if there's a nuclear exchange. And we can actually take the moon in front of the entire world, split it in half, and put it back together to prove that we could stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, said AFA to the Canadian government, we are going to allow the human race to stew in its own juices, because that's what it's about. It's about experience. It's about learning different things. It's not about them coming down and doing our homework for us or something like that. They're giving you hints. If you're in the field, they're trying to direct you. But in the end, it's all going to be experience. No matter what happens to you, good, bad, and different, you either learn from it or you don't learn from it. And we are all on individual paths, and we are all working on our own thing. And hopefully what we contribute to the world will raise the consciousness of the world where everybody rises up. But we're not necessarily going to save anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about experience. I've been an ET contactee. I've been an SSB asset, secret space program stuff. I've done channeling. I've done hypnosis. I've done psychic development, telepathy. I've done shamanism. I've magic, tried it all. It's all about consciousness. It's all about ESP. It's all about telepathic connections, higher self, other beings. It's all about the consciousness.
And that's the key word. And most people don't really want to hear it. Like most of the people thought, I remember when I first made the consciousness thing where I said, this is consciousness. This is what this is about. I remember a very famous interviewer at the time, Jerry Pippin, who's been dead for a few years, very good friend of mine. He actually interviewed me from his hospital bed. He was actually dying in hospital from cancer. And he interviewed me on a cell phone. It was like, I was really respectful of this guy, but he said to me, he said, Grant, I can't believe you've done this, because I was the president guy. I chased the president of the United States around. I didn't do the book, but I had the president's UFO website. So I had everything, any story that any president had a sighting or a contact or what they had said or what was in the libraries and stuff. And it was like, so I was like the cool guy. I mean, it was the UFO president guy. And he said, I can't believe you've done this. I can't believe you've gone from the presidents to this. It's like, and I said, well, Jerry, I kind of like, I didn't choose to go there. I kind of got teleported. And that was the thing is a lot of the things that happen to us, they just sort of happen and you pick it up. It's not like you actually, well, maybe you indirectly planned it, but you don't consciously realize you're planning this thing. And when you look back on your life and put the pieces, then it all makes sense. But looking ahead, you think, oh, this is kind of like, why is this happening or whatever? And in a couple of years, it'll make sense. It is all consciousness. But if you try to tell that to somebody, that there is like, even this, if you followed Donald Hoffman, who I started following, Deepak Chopra got into this, because Deepak Chopra says everything is an action inside consciousness. And you have to think about that a lot, exactly what he's referring to. And it's the idea, this is sort of Hindu idea, that there is no physical world. So my concept is there's consciousness. That's all there is. And consciousness is still, consciousness doesn't realize who it is. So it creates duality to know who it is, and it starts to vibrate. So consciousness vibrates and the illusion begins. It's the Hindu idea that illusion begins. And everything is an illusion. Everything is vibration. And because we have the left brain is that if you've done I talk about it a lot in the contact modalities, about the research that was done between the right and the left brain. People have no concept that you actually have two brains, and that when they cut the corpus callosum between the two brains will fight. I mean, they actually fight with each other. And the left brain has the language center. So the female right brain cannot talk, and the left brain is where the language is. And the left brain is what's running the world right now. And that's why I always say the women better take over the world before it's too late, because the men are running the show now. And it's this idea of the left brain believes in separation. It believes me versus you. It believes in objects. And that's because the left brain is language. It's into objects. So everything wants to be named. So people will say, oh, there's 12 dimensions and there's like all this. And I said, no, there's nothing of nothing. That's your left brain trying to put words to things. There are no words. It is a verb. Yeah, and that's one of the things that was told me in 2017. It's the thing. Is the world made out of little nuts and bolts like nouns? Or is it a verb? It's a verb. There are no nouns. And that Donald Hoffman has actually come forward. He's a clinical neurologist, or what would you call it? Yeah. He's a neurologist type guy. And he worked for Crick, who developed the DNA. And Crick got into consciousness. And Crick never believed, he still believed it was all just brain creates consciousness thing. And Donald Hoffman got it. And what Donald Hoffman says is that it's like an icon. There are no physical object. Anything that's a physical object is just an icon on the desktop that represents actual reality. Actual reality is non-local. You cannot interact with it. So everything is a representation of reality. It's like your icon for your email on your desktop. That's not your email. That just represents your email. Your email is way back in wherever. And that's the Deepak Chopra idea, is that we're turning things into nouns. So we've got, places and colors and because we need, the conscious mind puts all this kind of stuff. But in the end, when you get down to it, consciousness is the whole thing. And it's a verb. It's growing, it's learning, it's this duality thing. It's getting more complex all the time. And the whole thing, but it's very hard for somebody who's basically trying to pay their bills to explain them that, there may not be a physical world. There's no time and space. They go, get out of here. Like, go away. Like you're going to drive me nuts. You have to have thought about it an awful lot to realize this idea that everything's a verb and everything is an action inside consciousness, that there is no out, or what's his name? Wheeler, the guy who won the Nobel Prize for physics. Wheeler is his last name, but he's the guy who came up with black holes and wormhole theory, and he's the guy. He said there is no out there, And that really throws people for a loop, that no, there's everything's inside yourself. There is no out there. There is no stars out there. It's all within yourself. And when you tell people that, they just go like, get out of here. It's so far removed from the daily life that, this idea that you go within, or, a lot of people describe religions will talk about that, or the idea of out of body experience, that you're not actually, Pullman, I think, is the top out of body experience. He said, you're not going anywhere. You're going within yourself. You're not going out. And this concept that just throws people for a loop, because people want to have this thing, 1492. The world looks flat. Don't tell me the world ain't flat. It looks like the sun's going around the earth. Don't tell me it's not. And you basically are going according to what it appears to be. And that's one of the things that was described to me in 2017. Are you describing, or are you explaining? So science says we explain this, we explain that. Science explains nothing. Science just describes. It's like the Moses crossing the Red Sea. Oh, Moses went, he took a staff and he hit the edge of the Red Sea, and the sea opened up and the children of Israel went through, and then he closed the sea again. And they say, see, we explained it. No, you didn't. You just described it. Now explain the trick. How did he do it? And that's the whole thing. Science just describes what's going on. The cell does, like cell division. The cell's dividing. It just, this happens and this happens, this happens. And it's like 100 trillion atoms. That one cell, who's never built a cell, will take 100 trillion atoms, put them all together, put them in the right place, the right three-dimensional spot at the right time, and build a second cell that has life and can duplicate the entire universe. And so they said, we explained it. No, you didn't. You just described it. Now explain how the cell does it. And that's a big difference. So consciousness is what it's all about. But for the average person on the street, that's still, I think, pretty far removed from what their daily life is like.
Yeah, so if we look at Moses, how did he part the sea? He had a staff. So that staff might have been some kind of technology that you activate a field and it parts the sea. Because a wooden staff cannot just part the sea. There has to be something involved behind it. So maybe he activated it with thought consciousness, some kind of a technology, vibration. It's not a normal staff.
Yeah. So, but that's the same with everything. You look at almost everything. I even had an experience today where earlier today, I'm starting to, I think I'm going to go more into memory and stuff. So people say, okay, you've got the memories, they're in your brain. So the wire, and wires together, fires together, and these are the memories. I woke up, I just sort of dazed off. I was sitting up, I was dazed off, and I woke up and I had no idea who I was, what time, and it took a while. And I had no idea anything about anything, what time of the day, who I was, anything like that. And I'm thinking, well, where did that memory go? If it's all wired together. And that's the whole concept, is that the more you look at the universe, the more you look at even the simple thing like a cell division, the more you realize we have not got a clue. At one point, I was actually, I had interaction with what I call the field. And at one point it said, because I was taping it, and they said, you might as well put the tape recorder down. You're not going to understand this. And I tried to go to the tape recorder and say, you're not, I defy you to explain what you're about to see. And I have no idea what I saw. I just know I was showing something. And that's the whole concept. It's so far beyond. People want to make it very simple and say, oh, we've got this all figured out. And science does that an awful lot. Well, we got this figured out, and it's this, it's that, or whatever. And yet when you get into the depths of it, like even the staff idea, this technology, how did that come by? Where did it come from? And it all goes back to consciousness. It's all this stuff. It's all this Maya stuff. And that's why people are so powerful, that are able to use their mind, which is not their brain, and get in the field, because they have the power, because that's where it's all being built. And you can build stuff, even like Tesla. Tesla could invent stuff, and he said he would work on it in his mind until it worked perfectly, and that's when he would build it. He would not build it until he actually knew how it worked perfectly. And that's a concept that you and I may understand, or people who've had these experiences where you're picking up this stuff and you have noetic material, not just information, but noetic material comes with absolute certainty. It comes with this sense that this is something special. Like in 2012, when I had it, I couldn't think for 2 days. I'm going like, whoa. It's like, and all it was these three little things that came into my head. But when it came together instantaneously, I go, that's how it works. Like, I knew it. It was like, and that's something that people don't understand until you have the experience. So it's hard to explain to people what it's like to talk to an alien unless they talk to an alien. Or what it's like to be in the field, or what it's like to channel. You simply can't do it until you've had the experience.
Yeah, and channeling, sometimes information comes from them, the ETs, who are beings just like us, just may look different. The information might be so complicated, you don't fully understand what the heck you're receiving. And then you try to sort it out. And I'm a researcher and I worked at a university library. I'm all about experiments and proof and results. But I had to throw all that results out the window because what I was getting in the channeling, the message was something completely different than what I thought it was. So it was a lesson to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what one thing I've really learned is that I really lack in terms of trying to see things as being very simple. The more I look at it and the more they talk to me, the more I realize it's almost like David Bohm used to say. He was talking, he had this whole thing where he said, when we figure out quantum physics, he said, it's not the end. As soon as you get that figured out, there's another level below that. And they said, no, there's not. And he said, yeah, there is. It's like almost infinity, like the electromagnetic spectrum. We say, oh, we only see 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. We don't see any of it because it goes infinity on each end. It goes from one end to the other. And that's the whole idea of this idea of infinity, that it can get more complex and more complex and more, and levels below levels below levels below levels. And we haven't, and to say we understand what reality is at the bottom, it's God, it's whatever. No, it gets more complex. And the more we know, the more we realize there's levels that we don't know about. And it just defies knowledge that we can only work on whatever level we are. But a lot of people sort of believe they've got it all figured out and they've all got it all sorted out, whatever. And they may have a certain level figured out. But this thing with David Bohm, he said, no, when you get, when you figure out quantum physics and all the curiosities behind quantum physics and how it works and all the stuff that defies intelligence, there's another level below that. And people just couldn't accept that. And that probably is going to be true, that because the idea of infinity is a pretty hard thing to wrap your head around in terms of, or ultimate, that anything you can think about, you can do, that kind of thing. And then that's what I've learned in my experience, because I had no interest. I mean, I had no thing about, channeling or anything. I didn't have my first experience until 2012. I had UFO experiences. I had some really close ones where, I had this object, an orb type object that I was going to jump on. I was that close to it. I'd sort of gotten close into this thing and stuff like that, but I didn't have any messages and so I was sort of raised really religious, where, I'd say, well, miracles happen in the Bible, but they don't happen anymore. This is all people, because until you've had it. And then when you have your first one, you go, oh my God, like, you just can't believe that you've had this experience. And then you have to have empathy for the people who don't have the experience, because they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And you often hear the message is only for the people who are ready to hear the message. The message isn't for everybody. That we sometimes want to convert everybody, and we get frustrated with people who don't want to go along with what we think we know and stuff like that. And everybody is at their level and doing what they're supposed to do. Or even this, some of my assistants and we did an interview, which really defies people's knowledge. I had one person was a girl, had a near-death experience. She was driving a motorcycle face first into the concrete, and this is 50 years ago, and had a near-death experience. And I had a girl who was out of Edmonton, who was a QHHT practitioner, and she was reading a book and she had the experience. And another guy out of Los Angeles who is really good at fasting in float tanks. He gets messages in the float tank. So this is these three different modalities, and they all had the experience of everything is perfect, where they're in the field and everything is perfect. And they're afraid to tell their relatives that they had this experience. Like everything, the worst thing you could think of, it's part of the plan. It's all the way it's supposed to be, and this kind of stuff. And when you hear three people, so we actually did this interview with these three people, all telling the same story and how bizarre it was. And so it can get pretty complex and pretty sort of hard for people to grasp. So I don't, like, my whole family, I even had a discussion the other night. I was on a group, and one where I was interviewing one woman. She was really upset because her children you're spending the inheritance money and you're wasting it and stuff like this. And what are you doing? And I said, that's the rule. Your family never backs you. Never. I've never seen. I've got women who are not allowed to see their grandkids. I had a woman who had a very famous book came out. Her daughters put in an injunction to stop her from publishing the book. This is very common, that people, and it's almost like it keeps you grounded. Whereas people think that because it's a good idea for you and I, because this is, very inspirational and people need to know this and stuff, that we think everybody should know it. And we just can't grasp the fact that somebody will say, I'm not interested, Or like I'll go to a birthday party or something, and I'll be talking to someone. They'll come to me and they'll know I'm into UFOs, and they'll go, "What's the latest?" And I'm talking, and within about 5 minutes, you look around, and everybody's gone to the other side of the room. They just don't want to be around the conversation, and people have a hard time grasping that because they think it's sort of a rejection of them, but it's not. People are at whatever level they're at, and you know, we're in a situation where we may be at a higher level, but we have more responsibility. So it's like the Bible says, too much is given, much is expected. That if you have the information, you can't, when you leave. One of the big events I had in my life that really influenced me was seeing the work of Dr. Michael Newton, who did the work on life between lives. And according to him, the 7,000 people who regressed. Everybody, when they leave, you only get asked one question. You go in front of this council and they say, "How'd it work out?" And because you planned it, and you can't blame, you know, whoever for your mother-in-law or whatever, the dog ate your homework, all this kind of stuff, that you are there. And so to me, that's always the big thing is, to me, that we come into the world to do something, we're going to leave, and they're going to ask us how to work out. And all you and I have to do is figure out is, what did we come into the world and agree to do? And are we doing it? And it really doesn't matter, you know, whether anybody believes us or what goes on around us. We are responsible for our own thing. And almost like, you know, Anne telling Whitley Strieber, I'm no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you. I'm off the stage now. I'm on to do different things, and we'll catch you down the road. And you know, that kind of concept, the idea of remember who you actually are. And most people don't. They actually think they're the actor on the stage, and I'm trying to make money, and I'm trying to do this kind of stuff, and they don't. But you have to have empathy, because people, I get really frustrated and they get very angry that their family will not believe them. And I keep saying, I'll guarantee you, my son, I've written like 12 books. My son wouldn't read a book if his life depended on it. He's in a different world. He's doing different things, and that's his life. And I you know, just encourage him with what he's doing. And he doesn't have to believe me. He doesn't have to read my books or whatever. And people get kind of upset. They take it as a personal offense if their wife or their husband, although you do have people, and I don't know how your experience was in terms of how it happened for you, but I know in the UFO experience, people, the other thing people will talk about is they end up getting divorced. And then I always remind them, I said, do you know that people in near-death experiences, people who have near-death experiences, 75% get divorced? Because you are no longer, you're a different person. And your husband or your wife suddenly thinks like, what the hell happened to you? And that's what people don't realize, is that you're living your life, you're evolving on your own, but it doesn't mean everybody has to evolve along with you.
Well, for me, most people are scared of me because my energy is so energetic and so out there. My relationships don't last very long, so I've been single. I've been a single person for almost my 36 years because the things that I'm into, the things that I do, most people don't understand, and they can't even acknowledge that this is real. So I've learned to just stay in my own lane. What I do is my stuff, and when I'm in relationships, I'm just open-minded, and I don't really go into too much detail about what I do, because people are scared of it, or they don't understand and they turn away.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends and my family, like my parents, they're like, tell me more about what you do, because it's so interesting. So my parents raised me to keep an open mind. Experiences are okay. So my family, my parents, my friends, they're all good with this stuff. It's more like the personal relationships, like marriages, partnerships. Those people don't really understand what I am in consciousness as a being, and that's okay. To each their own. That's how I interpret that, because we are a universe within ourselves, and we don't have to be the same or alike. We're all different.
That's why you see at UFO conferences, you've ever been to or consciousness conferences, when people get together there, that's like family. It's like, oh my, I haven't seen you, and people are hugging, and it's like, it's just because that's the people that vibrate, or like experiencers will go in the room. I remember they just started this because, as you know, the UFO world was always very nuts and bolts. So they didn't want the experiencers, because you're anecdotal. We don't want to hear your stupid story about you thought you did this and you thought you did that. We want measurement stuff. We want to, colors and stuff like that. So these experiencers would meet in the back room at this big UFO conference, and they used to be like 30. And then I remember the one year I went and I said, well, which room is it in? Is it? And they said it's full. I said, oh, okay. And they said, there's 2 rooms and they're both full. There's 150 people and there's people in there crying, and they come from all across the United States. They're not coming for the conference. They're coming for the fact that they're around people who are like them, that have the experiences, and that becomes their family. Or people will experience the fact that the beings, that they believe that they are a family of the beings, not this is my real family. And it's this relationship that other people would think you're totally insane, but you'll see that at conferences all the time, that people, they're just dying to get together with people because they don't have any real support in their own life in terms of people that they can talk to about it. So when they get around like 100 people who are all talking about it, and there's like 7 or 8 people at each table, and everybody's, fighting to see how much they can talk, it's quite powerful stuff. Where I think the last I saw, and I haven't been there for a number of years, but there was 2 rooms. They had to have 2 rooms to hold all the people who wanted to just come and tell their story. And so I would have these, and you may have been at one of my, sometimes I have these things online, experiencer panels online, where people just come on and you just open it up and say, okay, be respectful of other people. Don't talk all day, talk for 5 minutes. And I have like, 70, 80 people, and all they want to do is come on and tell their story, because they want support, and they feel powerful around other people, that people are listening to them. And so that, I think, is part of the role of what I do. And I think you do the same sort of thing, is that you do what you think you're supposed to be here to do. And that's what you got to figure out. And whatever anybody else does, that's their own personal thing. They have to answer for it. And in the end, they may be right and we may be wrong. You never know. I mean, so you have to just do the best you can with what you've got, and live it that way. And then at least when you die, you say, I did the best I could. I lived it the way I thought I should live it. It's almost the fear you have is that you're going to get across and say, well, if I'd lived in Vancouver, I would have done something. I mean, I lived in Winnipeg. I was really cold there. And say, people trying to make excuses. And it's like, you whatever situation you find yourself, one person said, you can either, like, you get dumped on, you can either get dumped on, or you can bloom from where you've been planted. And it's that idea that you do what you can with what you've got.
Yeah, I can't even board a plane because of medical stuff. So I have never been to a conference physically in my life. The way I get around is I talk to people online. I connect in roundtables. I do the interviews, because for me, if it's not one way to get the information out, there's always another way to communicate and talk. So I've learned, like, nothing is ever what it seems, and there's always a way to do something and accomplish something. So there's always a path and a way. So there's never barriers. And I've learned that through consciousness.
And that's what COVID has actually done, is it's actually increased. Because I remember, I've had some relationships where they say, you have no friends, I said, I have no friends. I can go to any state. I can go to almost any country in the world. And I have like 3 or 4 people I can phone up and say, I'm in the country. Oh, come on over, and that's it. People have the idea that you have to have sort of face-to-face relationships. COVID has brought out this thing that the world is one. We are all connected, and that you can connect around the world, and you can go onto a Zoom conference and bring in 70 or 80 people. And you see people, they always say the thing at the beginning, tell us where you're from. And it's like, oh, Singapore and Hong Kong, and these people from all over the place, and they're all one and they're all connected. And so COVID, people, has its downside, but it has its upside, that we have started to learn this kind of concept, because that to me is the absolute number one concept, is oneness. I think that's the number one message that the beings that I've seen have given to people, is the concept of oneness and love, that you are all one. And I even called the virus the oneness virus. That people say, no, we're separate. No, we're separate. Don't tell me what to do and stuff. And it's like, no, everybody's connected. This is sort of showing you everybody's connected. And when you see it online, you start to realize that if a person wouldn't identify themselves, or you wouldn't see their picture on the screen, you wouldn't know what country they're from. You wouldn't know anything. You're just exchanging beliefs with them and sharing, and that they're no different than you and I. They just were born in a different place. And that if I was born in China, I would believe different things. If you're born in the United States, because I think you're close to the border too, but I always realized I'm 64 miles from the US border. And if I'd been born 65 miles south of where I am, I would be a different person. I would believe in different stuff. and that a lot of people think that, because you're in some country, you're special, or that, everybody in the world sings God Bless America. Well, no, they don't. I mean, everybody has different ideas, and so you take these different things, and in your different lives, you're going to come in and experience different things. And so I always warn people, whatever really offends you in this life, get ready, because that's probably what you're coming back as, because you need to learn empathy and understanding. And this multiple life thing really changes it, where you realize, like, you're going to play all the roles. You're going to play the kid in the cage. You're going to play the refugee. You're going to play whatever, the poor person. And that's what it's about. It's learning all the different lessons. It's not about being the rich guy with all the money and living on the hill all the time. You don't get to do that. Once you've done that, you've learned that experience, you need to go and learn something else.
Yeah, I mean, money and riches don't get you what you want always, because you don't learn the toughest lessons. You don't learn the most interesting lessons if you have everything in the world that you ever wanted.
Yeah. Or you see the people who have the people who have cancer and say it was the best thing that ever happened to me, or stuff like that people don't realize that the things that happen bad to you are the things you probably are learning stuff from, that when your things are good for you and everything's going, then your ego the left brain gets in there and goes, man, I'm pretty smart. I got this all figured out, man. I just like it. And because I know I just written a book on psilocybin. I did, I've done 20 high dose sessions now, but I do the first 16. And the number one lesson in this thing is when you go in, it's like the near death experience thing. You go in, if you take your ego in there and you think you're going to control the situation, get ready. You are about to have the time. You think you got trouble now. This thing will take you down so fast and so hard. You be pleading like you be put in hell and stuff. And it's this idea of surrender. You have to surrender, and you've got to get rid of the ego, and then you get allowed into the field. And if you think you're going to go in there with a gun, or you're going to run the show, the universe, that's one of the things I learned from psilocybin. The universe will absolutely teach you a lesson you will never forget. And I think the UFO thing is the sort of same thing, or near-death experience. They talk about who people have bad near-death experiences. And a lot of times it comes down like people who commit suicide, and that's all ego. What is suicide? Suicide is self-rumination. It's the ego wins. The ego, I'm poor me. The world's all about me. And when you have the near-death experience stuff, you see a lot of people who are trying to control the thing. When they have the bad near-death experience, they will not surrender. They're just trying to fight the thing. Or if you see at Skinwalker Ranch, George Knapp, people are always trying to figure out what happened to Skinwalker Ranch, what's going on there. And it was all this paranormal phenomena. And George Knapp summed it up in one line. He said, the people who were the most aggressive to the phenomena at the ranch had the worst experiences. They had special forces guys in there with guns, and they were going to go, and we're going to get control of this thing. And they got shut down. The 1-3 guys. And I said, were they armed? Did they have arms? Because they're like this evil alien guys are picking on them or whatever. I said, no, did they have guns? Did these guys have guns? And I finally found out, yeah, they were armed. They were special forces guys who had been hired. And when they went home from that experience, they were told, stop, leave. You are not welcome. And they were absolutely petrified. Special forces guys. They went home, and in the room, there was wine bottles flying across the room, smashing against the walls and stuff. Everybody they lived with moved out. It was that bad. And these guys and that's the whole deal, is that you have to have this idea of surrender, of being one with everything, and the idea of the left brain, like, I'm running this show, I'm going to do what I want. My ego is very powerful. In the universe, the lessons that you get taught will absolutely destroy that. That's the whole thing about the bad trip or the bad near-death experience stuff, where the universe will tune you in.
Well, Skinwalker Ranch is a huge vortex where beings come in and out and travel through. So you cannot come in there with the intention of, I have firearms, I have weapons, I'm going to expose you, I'm going to blast you. You come in without anything, and you sit quietly by the fire. And you meditate, and you have a pleasant experience. Welcome. Hi, how's it going?
Exactly.
And
but the way they had it was they had hired these special forces guys, and that's their mentality. That's the whole thing behind. If you hear like the TTSA thing, they say, or Lou Elizondo says, well, I'm in military. I'm here to defend the United States against forces, foreign and domestic. And that's what's called the Nuremberg Defense. It's like, I'm just doing my job. And so a lot of people go in there with that left brain mentality of, I'm going to control things. And Anybody gets my way, even like the Rendlesham Forest, there's another example of Rendlesham Forest where only one guy was injured, and that was John Burroughs. And so the thing was, oh, this injured John Burroughs, these are evil beings or whatever. And then I heard the story that there was three of them. There was Peniston at the front, Burroughs was in the middle, and a guy by the name Kabanzak was at the back, and they were going out, and this thing flared up. And Peniston said, open fire. And Burroughs, according to one story, pulled his gun. Burroughs was the only guy who was injured. And so that's this whole idea is that this evil alien thing, that if people say, you know, they're evil, they're abducting people, they're doing all this kind of stuff. I said, well, let me ask you, did they ever drop an atomic bomb? No. Well, okay. When they drop an atomic bomb, bring me the evil alien petition. Until then, we have met the enemy and he is us. We're calling them the enemy, you know, and we're the ones that drop atomic bombs, put kids in cages, you know, firebomb Tokyo in 1945 and cremate 80,000 people alive. I mean, who's the enemy here? Or even the idea of aliens. Like they say, oh, the aliens, they're in our airspace. I said, who was here first? You hear the stories. They were here forever. It's their airspace. And if anybody owns land, nobody owns the land. We're here to take care of the land. But if anybody owns the land and the airspace, it's them. We're in their airspace. We need to play nice in the sandbox or they're going to shut us down. But we have this idea that we own things, which is a left-brained idea. We don't own anything. We're just here to take care of that. We're here for a short time. And it's like these wrong blocks that we have make this assumption that we actually own things. And that there's enemies against us and that we're victims and this kind of stuff. And it's the thinking that has to change. So I believe there are no good or bad people. There's just people with good and bad beliefs. And it's the beliefs that determine when you do the bad things, or the idea of separation. I say everything to me that's considered evil in the modern world is based upon one thing: the mistaken belief in separation. When you believe that you are separate from someone else and this person is an enemy, that's when you start making the bad mistakes. If you suddenly realize you are one with the one that is all, that we are all one, we're all sparks of the divine, how can you cut off your own arm? How can you attack yourself? We are all together, and we are all working towards one point, but people don't want to believe that. They've gotten into this idea about separation, about the Canadians are the good guys, the Americans are the good guys, these are the bad guys. And it's like business. Create a need and fill it. So you need enemies, and then we need a $730 billion defense budget in order to get all rid of the bad guys. So you have the country with the biggest bully on the block with the biggest defense budget is the scaredest of them all. And it's like everybody's an enemy, everybody's against us. And it's that kind of mentality that it just sort of feeds on itself. Whereas in Canada, you know, people, it's like, you know, nobody really cares. It's like, what's the hockey game score, you know, like, or how do you stay alive in the cold, or like nobody really, it's a different world, although it is getting sort of moved towards the American idea. But we used to be the guys with the you know, the blue hats that were the peacekeepers. That's the only time we'd ever go into anything if there's a peacekeeping mission. And now our beliefs are starting to shift, where we're starting to believe there's evil guys that are out to get us.
Yeah, and with the ETs as well, people ask me, are they good? Are they bad? I'm like, they can be anything in between, because there's different species of different ETs with agendas. Some of them are peaceful, some of them are on the fence, some of them are warlike. They're all beings.
But see, where I would still go is that they're all just people. They're just people.
It's
people. It's like you have people who do good and bad things, as the Bible says. You know, let he who is perfect cast the first stone. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You see the speck in the alien's eye, and you have a log in your own eye. It's this idea that it's the belief system. So, because if we get into races, if we get this race is good, this race is bad. This is racism. This is the idea that all Mexicans are bad. They're all drug dealers and, you know, rapists and murderers and stuff like that. And no, the Mexicans are the same as you and I. They do good things and they do bad things. And it's like Jesus. That was the whole thing between this Mary Magdalene, they wanted Jesus, they wanted her stoned. And they said, come on, Jesus, you know what the rules are. You got to stone her. We got to stone her. And that's when he said, let he who is perfect cast the first stone. That we are all in this situation, and it's our beliefs that move us into societies that all start to believe one thing, and everybody joins together. Or even like, I remember, like now, the thing that offends me most in the United States is how you can put kids in cages. I remember early on in Canada, I grew up with a guy who actually became a minister. I didn't become a minister, but his parents came from Germany. I remember asking them very many years ago, I said, you're from Germany, like, why didn't you do something? Like, what? And they said, well, it's almost the same rule as the United States. Like now, it's like, well, we really couldn't do anything. We didn't know what was going on. And it's like all these things. And that's the whole idea. People just sort of go along with it. And it's not like there's bad people. People just sort of go along with it. Or as when they asked, what's his name? Adolf Eichmann, after World War II. I mean, how could you put people in a gas chamber? How could you possibly do this? You're a bad guy. How could you possibly do this? He said it was the easiest thing in the world to do. I just did my job. I saluted and did my job. And that's the thing that Lou Elizondo is saying. I'm just doing my job. And so whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to do, because I'm a military guy and I salute and I do my job. And you get people that go along with this kind of stuff. So to me, it's always that, like, because if you believe there are, say, for example, if we believe like the Greys, everybody hates the Greys. Okay, the Greys. Okay, so what happens if you die and tomorrow you wake up and you're a Grey? Are you now an evil person? No, you're just a person. And every being will have the good and the bad, and some will be higher elevation. Some societies be higher elevation. They've understood the oneness concept a little bit better. But in terms of the thing, it's like, everybody's learning. Everybody's in this lesson thing. Everybody goes back and they gets asked one question: how did it work out that you and I are in the thing and we're building the thing? And so I separate from people that, sort of eliminate, especially the idea that we are the good guys. Or if you saw Richard Doty was just on the other night, and it's like we had these aliens at Area 51 and we tried to get it, we electrocuted them. And it's like, really? Really? You're calling yourselves a good guys? You're electrocuting these aliens that crashed and just bizarre. I don't think the story is true, but I mean, just this bizarre mentality that we have, that these things are animals. We capture them with traps, and we like, oh my goodness.
Nobody's animals. They're all beings.
Yeah.
And people ask me, are ET gods? Are ETs like God? I'm like, no, they're beings. They're beings.
Yeah.
They might be higher advanced than us or lower advanced. Nobody's God. We're all part of the God spark, but we're not God.
That's the thing you got to remember. Bashar, the one is the all are the one. The one guy asked the tall gray on the ship, he said, let me ask you why. Let me ask you, what's your concept of God? And the guy said, we are one with the one who is all. I just published a book for a guy out of Israel, or helped him publish his book. He wrote the book on the one. And that was he had a Israeli guy he was living in LA at the time, 30 years ago. And basically, that was his whole concept. He wrote a whole book on it. He's writing a second book on the whole concept of one. That is the number one thing that the beings are trying to get across, this idea that you are all part. And so because we want to do the separation thing. The left brain is separation. So we want to do separation. What we do not tell me what to do. I'll do whatever I want. Do not tell me what to do. And so we detonate an atomic bomb and we say, that doesn't affect anybody. I can do it. It's my airspace. If I want to detonate an atomic bomb, and we got to realize it's all one thing. It's all a bell, that when you ring this edge of the bell, it goes through the entire universe. And that's why they showed up in 1947, is because we had detonated Trinity. And they said, this not only affects you, it affects the rest of the universe. And we said, no, it doesn't. No, it just affects me. Don't tell me what to do. We want to, and that's why they shut down the nuclear weapons. That is the main thing I think they're worried about, is shutting down the nuclear weapons, that they can shut them down anytime they want, because it affects them as well. It vibrates through the entire universe. Whereas we're into this left brain idea, was, I can do whatever I want and it doesn't affect anybody. It just, it's my own business. And we got to get to the idea that what is our business is everybody's business. And whatever you do to Gaia, whenever you dump stuff in the river, it affects everybody else. What you do to Gaia, what you do to the universe, whatever we do is a vibration in the universe. And when we're positive, it helps the universe. And when we're negative, it degrades the universe.
Yeah. And there's also the thing is that, there has been much more that's happened in terms of space flight and space exploration that we're not even given half of the truth to what exists on the moon, Mars, and other planets. So that's secretive. That's classified.
Yeah, because they like that, because it's all enemy. It's all, we have to do this because if we don't, then the Russians are going to discover it and they're going to come and kill us, and the Chinese, and it turns into money. It turns into this issue that I'm on the edge and I've got this material. And if this will help the world be safe, and I need a few $1 billion, I'm going to bring my suitcases tomorrow. You give me the money. And that's the way it works. It's all, especially in the United States, there's only 3 rules in the United States. Number 1 rule is money. Number 2 rule is money. Number 3 rule is money. And it's got to do, and you get money by creating fear, about making people feel insecure, and then saying, I'm going to save you, I'm going to help you, and I need this money, and we're going to keep it secret. Because a lot of people don't realize, I know one guy who gets medical inventions from the beings. He told me, met him in 2013. He's actually Tyler D. If you've read the book American Cosmic, he's the top NASA guy. And he got this invention in his head that they put on the space shuttle. He had to fight. And this company that he formed sold for $100 million on NASDAQ on this invention. And he's got 40 inventions. He got 40 patents. He believes he gets them from the beings. And he tells us contact modality, how he actually contacts the beings. He sleeps for 8 hours. Then he gets up. Then he goes back to bed for 1 hour. That's extremely important. Then he gets up. He lives in Florida. He gets a big glass of water. He goes and sits on the deck in the sun, and he starts to drink the glass of water, and he starts to talk to the beings. So that's the one thing that people got to realize. A lot of the secrecy has got to do with the fact that if you're on the inside and you're a scientist working on the leading edge of this technology, are you going to make it public? No, because there's a lot of money in this thing. You want to get the patent. So you say, oh, I can't talk. It's got to be secret or whatever, because all these people have patents, whether it's Gary Nolan, who's doing the DNA work. He's got a bunch of patents. Hal Puthoff has patents. All these guys have patents. There's money involved if you can develop the technology. So if you're on the leading edge of this stuff, you're not going to share it for anything, because you're going to make some money out of this thing, and everybody wants to have their kids drive cars. Even this Tyler D told me one time, it was funny because this is like the top NASA guy, who has got all these inventions and stuff, and is in contact with the beings and stuff. And he said to me, he says, my daughter said, Dad, can you quit talking about this stuff? I can't take this kind of stuff. And he says to his daughter, he says, just remember where the Lexus comes from. And he said that she shut up. And I think, man, Tyler D, his daughter doesn't believe me either. And that's the whole thing. It's like, because I guess he's obsessed like you and I, like you're talking about it all the time. And you got to be careful when you're in relationships or stuff that you don't talk about it, because you think it's exciting, and the people will put up with you for a while, and then they just can't take it anymore. And that's, I guess, where he would be talking about it, and he's so excited about it and stuff like that. And she's in a different world, but it's kind of interesting that even the top people have this idea where they're sort of isolated from the world. And he's had many relationships. He's not married. I'd say a lot of people in the UFO community are not married. It's the same thing. It's like the near-death experience community, that you sort of get isolated by your experience because you vibrate at a different level than everybody else. You're talking about, you're interested in different stuff, and you sort of grow apart. Like you're just not really talking about what they're talking about. They're not talking about what you're talking about. And it's not good or bad. It's just the way it is, that you have to live with, whatever you've been dealt with. And because a lot of people try to change the dealer. And I say, this idea that whatever situation you find yourself in, you chose to be in it. And we've spent our life trying to change the dealer. We want to deal me different cards. I don't want these cards anymore. And instead of playing the cards that you're dealt, and that's what it comes down to. You take the cards you're dealt, you play them the best you can. And when you die, you may have not done the right thing, but you did the best you could.
And, when on the other side, if I'm asked, well, how did it go? I had the most amazing, challenging experiences in this lifetime. I learned so much. What's next? Let's go.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an exciting thing that you go to the next thing. And it's whatever it is. So if it happens to be a poor person or whatever, it's like you understand that the universe will put you where you need to go rather than where you want to go. Because most people will want to go back to, good stuff and feed me candy and candy floss and stuff like that, instead of realizing that wherever you're put, wherever you got, almost like I don't know if you know the story of Sherry Wild. Sherry Wild is they're going to do a movie, or they're going to do a series on her experience. She's had a very traumatic experience with the beings or whatever. And at one point she asked them, they say that they come as a Zeta, like a Zeta Reticuli being, and she's publishing the book, and then she's the one, her daughters got the injunction to stop her from publishing the book. And so they'd say they're from Andromeda, and then the publisher said, that can't be right. They got to be from Zeta Reticuli. They're Zetas. And she goes, really? She didn't really understand. And they said, go back and ask Da, like, what's going on here? So she goes back to him and says, are you actually from Zeta? Are you actually from Andromeda? And because you're a Zeta. And he said, no, that would not best describe who we are. And then she says, well, who are you? An alien, or what are you? And then he says, we are on, how do you, I can't remember, just paraphrase it. We are on a mission through the universe on call to the creator, something to that effect. We go where we're told to go. And that's what we do. And we use the Zeta body because it's more practical than a human body. And then she said, well, why? Because she said, why do you come as this ugly looking gray thing? You scare the daylights out of me every time you come. And he said, ugly looking gray thing. Are you kidding? And she said, yeah, you scare me. And he said, I scare you. And then she said, yeah, you block my memory. Every time you block my memory. And so when you come back again, I forget who you are. And then I'm all scared again. And then he said, you ever look in the mirror? You know, when you come at us with those teeth, we think you're going to eat us. It's this bizarre conversation where, and that's the idea, is that you realize it's like the Anne thing. I'm no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you. Is the beings are just etheric beings in bodies, and you take on a human body. I took on a human body. They take on a Zeta. They take on whatever body, and that's what they told this Yossi Ronan, the Israeli guy, is that they told him. We come into the physical world. We need a physical body. We can take on whatever body we want to take on. And we don't need the bodies, and you don't need the bodies. And you just don't realize that yet, that you come in. Yeah. And when they left his room, they described, and people describe this all the time, is when they left the room, they all grabbed hands, these beings, and they made a circle, and they started going round and round. And he said, suddenly they become translucent. They could see through the beings. And then they turned into this ball of light, which went into the middle, little tiny ball, and they disappeared. So I said, okay, so is it a flesh and blood alien? Or is it a ball of light? And if it's a ball of light, does he make an eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning? And that's the question, is what are we really dealing with? We're dealing with etheric beings who can take on physical presences, or we can go into theirs and take on etheric presences. And that's what it is. We're all the same thing. We're just etheric beings in bodies. Yeah. All the world's a stage. All the men and women are but actors. They have the entrances and exits, and every man plays many roles. And that's what people seem to forget. And that's sort of the bottom line message, is remember who you actually are. You are not a player on the stage. You are playing an actor on a stage.
It's not all about flesh and bone. I mean, a couple of days ago, I was roughhousing with my cat, who's a Maine Coon, and she just reached out with her claws and she literally dug into my nose, and there's a big gash. Yeah. Every time I do an interview, I put on some bronzer moisturizer, and I slather foundation on so I don't scare people with the huge gash on my nose. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter. I never wear makeup to interviews, but I don't want to scare people with this huge thing on my nose and have questions like, what happened to you? So I cover it up just so I don't scare others. This is just flesh and bone. It's what powers my body is my soul and more, etherically, consciously. So, you know, I just put on the makeup so I don't scare anybody, but I'm not an expert with makeup. It's just cover up.
Yeah. It's just like a suit that you put on. But the ego wants you to be, good and lovely and all this kind of stuff. And it's into this me. Yeah. And that's where, it gets into self-rumination and depression and stuff like that. And that's when you get these situations like with psychedelics or out-of-body experiences where you can actually block it, where you can shut the ego down. And like with the ayahuasca, they will describe the fact that I suddenly realized everything was alive, conscious, and one and connected. And we don't realize that because we're sort of in this world where we see ourselves in the mirror and stuff like that. And you can easily fall into the illusion of thinking things are what you see. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but we have a long way to go, a long way to evolve. And that's where you and I are sort of on the leading edge, where I always call it the Super Bowl. If you realize where you are, what's going on, you realize you're playing, you are not outside the stadium, because most people live lives of quiet desperation. They have not a clue what's going on. None. You and I realize what's going on. So we are in the stadium. We are actually not even just in the stadium. We are on the field playing the game, and you may be the water boy, you may be the quarterback, you may be whatever, but we are in the, and you've got to realize, you got to respect the fact that you got lucky enough to play in the biggest game that has ever been played. If you understand what's going on and appreciate it and do the best you can. Whereas most people will never know what's going on. And so that's when you suddenly realize who you are and the game you're playing in, then you take it seriously and you do what you're supposed to, and not to forget that you are in this big game and that you are an etheric being who is just playing a role and has come here to do something.
Yeah, it's not about what's on my nose or that I bled the other night because my cat, I still show up and I still do the shows because this is important. The information is important. The ideas that we share. So for me, I don't care if I got hurt by my cat, I bled. I show up because this is good. This is good experience.
Yeah. Yeah. You even get, I always sometimes refer to like this idea about the fact that you realize who you are. You could have been an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta and live your life in the junkyard, finding something valuable enough to sell for food for tomorrow. And a lot of people live in that, and people think, oh, it's got to be terrible. And yet when you're in that situation, it's like being injured by your cat. When you're in that situation, they're just as happy as everybody else. They're living their life. They don't realize they're just in there. And so it really doesn't matter where you are. It's what you do with where you are. And people sort of think it's like the idea where, if I was in a certain city, well, then I'd get off my rear end and do something. There's all these outside things that are affecting me. And if I didn't have a scratch on my nose, I'd do something. And people want to sort of, and that's your left brain talking. But in the end, whatever happens to you, so if we suddenly lose an arm or a leg or whatever, or get cancer, you gotta go on. You got to do with what you can with what you've got, and not try to change the dealer, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to just give me the good cards. Don't deal me any of the 2s and 3s. I want aces and I want kings and queens, and that's all I want to be dealt here. And so it's all belief, it's all attitude that affects the way you are. And if you've got the right belief, then you're going to be moving in the right direction and helping the world be a better place, helping consciousness evolve, helping the universe become a better place than it is, more evolved than it is. And eventually we'll all get here. It's all an experience. And just do what you can with what you got.
Well, my makeup is not normal makeup. It has healing antioxidants, my foundation. So what I put on my nose is not just a cover up, it's also healing skin. So there's a purpose to everything. It's like, I don't like unethical makeup, for example. That's been, it has to be cruelty free. It has to be paraben free. It has to be everything free that's healthy for skin. So that's ethical makeup. I don't put on stuff that's expensive, but it's been tested on animals and it's cruel to animals or other beings. I don't use that kind of stuff. The product better be healthy and the product better be divine and useful.
Yeah. If we all start doing that, then it moves everything in the right direction. But people will, do it because it's cheaper, or it's it's not as much trouble, or we can make more money by, doing the other way. You make your step, you make your move, and it influences other people, and the people start making the move, more and more people. And because in the end, I mean, people, if you take a look at products, it was not even 100 years ago that the world ecology was developed. Before then, it was like free for all. I mean, now the ecology, the idea of protecting Gaia, of not throwing stuff in the rivers and stuff like that, has changed. And people don't realize. They think this has always been like this. No, I mean, it was a horrible place before. And so we're moving in the right direction. And because it takes so long, we don't realize, but we are going in the right direction, where even simple things like makeup has changed in terms of how we treat the world.
Yes, exactly. And I don't buy makeup that's, it has to be cruelty free to animals, and it cannot be tested in labs so much. It has to be good for the skin. I believe any makeup that women wear should be good for their skin and organic. That's just me, because I don't place value on slathering my skin in makeup.
Yeah.
Just a bit of cover up for the cat gashing me. That's the only time I ever even use it, because just to cover up something where I bled out the other night. That's it.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's vanity. It's just vanity for looking good. And for me, I don't place value on looks and vanity.
Yeah. Or people will do the thing like you've got the latest designer clothes or makeup and stuff like that, like you're in the in crowd. I always describe that in terms of the aliens, where if you go in terms of the people on the ship, like there's no designer clothes, there's no leather couches, there's no chandeliers, there's no food, they are minimalists. They're almost like socialists. They work together like a beehive. They all do, and it's a completely different world. Like even clothes. Like I always say, do you have any clothes on? I go, no, I don't have any clothes on. It's like, the completely different world than we live in terms of they're here to do a job, they're here to do whatever, and they have no interest in anything sort of physical. Because people say, oh, they're going to take over the world. Why would they take over the world? They don't need the world. They don't need anything. They basically, you look at their ship, it's very minimalist. It's very just do the job, almost like a beehive. And they say, well, that's terrible. I mean, it's like a beehive mentality. Yeah, well, we need a little bit more beehive mentality to save the world, in terms of everybody realizing that we're all one, and that if you start destroying the hive and doing all sorts of stupid things that you're not supposed to do, or not do your job, it all falls apart. You all got to realize we're all working together. Or even like the cell, like the beehive is the analogy that I always use with the Greys. But the other one is that you have your human body. So you have 85 trillion cells in the human body, and they all do exactly what they're supposed to do. They follow orders. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. And when you get a cell that decides, oh, I'm going to be separate, I'm going to be different, I'm going to have an ego, I'm going to do whatever I want, that's what's called a cancer cell. When it does whatever it wants to do, and that's when you realize that all the cells are working together, and that's the way the universe is supposed to work together. And we have this idea of separation, that no, I'm not going to work together with everybody else. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to get 5 cars, and I'm going to whatever. And we got to realize that when the body, all the cells work together, then the body is healthy. When everybody starts going their own way and there's separation, that's when things fall apart. The cell, the universe and the earth can get cancer just the same as the human body when things aren't working together.
Yeah, and I like the simplicity, what you said about the ETs. No couches, no wearing different clothes. You come on board, they give you that gray uniform or the blue one or whatever, or the robe. Some of them are into robes. They give you the robe and you're like, why am I being given this? This is what we wear. This is just the uniform. We're not into glitz and glamour. Here you go.
Yeah. They used to have a story. They always said the one alien story was that they were going to make people work in gold mines. This is part of the takeover. And I said, hey, have you ever heard of a story of a being with jewelry on? What do they need gold for? They don't need gold. And it's this idea, and people don't even think about it. They just sort of repeat the story. Yeah, they're going to put us in gold mines, and they're going to gather. And then they made this story. Oh, they need gold in their atmosphere or something to counter it. But this is the thing. When you take a look, why would they take over? They don't really need anything. They are not. That's got nothing to do with why they're here. The messages are completely different. They're trying to get us to grow up and realize we are about to flush the planet down the drain. And that's they can't really do anything. They'll show 39% of all experiencers see the ship. I always say, do you see the screen? They show you the screen on the ship. And they go, yeah, I saw the screen. What do you see on the screen? What did they show you? And they show you either this massive fire that Yossi Ronan saw, which was the fires of Australia. They show you the catastrophic wave. Even I've seen the wave, or the nuclear destruction, or the big one is the environment, where they show you the environment very nice and everything's beautiful. And then the screen starts to change. Next thing, there's dead fish floating around and stuff like that. And they put this into the person's head so that you take it back. And it doesn't mean that that's going to happen, but it changes the attitude of that person. So you see a lot of experiencers are, will have makeup like you, or they will be vegetarians. And you go like, why are they all? Because they've been influenced. They've been shown this screen. They've been shown all this stuff, and it's not directly, but indirectly, they picked up all this stuff, and that changes the vibration of everybody else. And they start talking about animal rights and all this kind of stuff, and it starts to spread, and it gets a little bit more. And then people go, yeah, that makes sense. We shouldn't really, keep little animals in little tiny cages and stuff like that. And it slowly changes it indirectly by people that I think maybe made agreements with the aliens. Because that was one of the things, was the soul contract idea that I asked Mary Rodwell, who's done 3,000 regressions. I said, Mary, if you regress everybody back and say, at any point did you agree to be in this situation, the abduction situation? I said, how many people would agree and say, yeah, I agreed to this? She'd say, yeah, like 100%. And that's the whole deal, is there's this idea that there may be a soul contract, that you and I are in agreement with whoever we're dealing with on the other side, that we came in to do this. You do this, I'm going to do this. Next time I play the alien and you play the human being. And that it's this process of, we're on the stage, we come on the stage, we play this role that we're supposed to do. We've got to remember who we are, what role we're supposed to play. And that kind of stuff that people never really think about is like, no, there's no agreements. And it's like, no, there may be, because that's when you ask Kathy Martin, who's runs the MUFON Experiencer group. I said, Kathy, you ever think about this soul contract idea that everybody's agreed to this thing? And she said, I used to wonder about that. She said, so I actually got myself regressed. and I got myself regressed back to birth. And I actually heard the words come out of my mouth. I agreed to this. And I said, oh, thank you. So that's the thing, is you start seeing things in the proper perspective, and everything sort of shifts as to what's going on, because people will, because the military will do it. Like, we're being threatened. Like, what's going on? I mean, what do they want? Are they going to steal our stuff? Because we're thinking about how we would do it. If we went to another planet, we'd go in there and get rid of the, put everybody on Indian reservations and take over the land and do that kind of stuff. We're thinking the way we would think, because we're into separation. We're into material items. Whereas you look at it, they're not into any material items. They're not interested in that kind of stuff. They're in basically this oneness idea. Get it together, folks. You are about to flush. You got to realize you're part of a universe. You're all part of one thing. You got to understand the oneness concept and the idea of love. And unless you do, this to show you the screen, which basically says, we can't really do anything to stop it. But unless you do, this is about what's going to happen.
And people always ask me, I get emails, when are those med beds coming? Why won't the ETs save us? Why won't they cure me? You need to work on yourself to cure yourself. You can't depend on advanced medical technology to find you a cure. Everybody's like, when are those med beds coming? And not in 5-9 months. Like, there's so much conspiracy theory going on. Med beds. I'm like, that's just rumor. Don't take it as fact. It's floating about on the internet like much disinformation does concerning all the stuff in the UFO field, disclosure. So much of it is misinformation and disinformation. Like, who told you the med beds are coming? President Donald Trump said it yesterday. No, he didn't. I mean, like, use discernment. Use your own brain power to think for yourself. Just because somebody said it doesn't mean it's going to be gospel tomorrow.
And if you look at the multiple life thing, you take a look at Dolores Cannon was big into this. Was you may have agreed to come in and have cancer. You may have agreed to have this. And so the way she did her therapy is to say, what, like, you don't get it because of accident. People think it's like, oh, I'm a victim. I mean, God gave me cancer or whatever. You start to realize that you have part of this thing, that you can cure yourself. That if you go through these therapies and understand that you are part of what's happening to you and you're not a victim, then you can change it. And they had all these cure things where they would, move people around by understanding why they had this disease, why they had agreed to this disease, and how if you change your attitude, you can change the course of your disease. And that, but people want to play the victim thing, and that's what the ego wants to do. Ego wants to say, I'm separate from you. Everybody's picking on me. The world's unfair and stuff like that. And if you get the right attitude, because you hear like 50% of all experiencers say they were either cured or they can cure people. So it's like, I remember Ray Hernandez said, if I had $1 for every person, and every experiencer said they can do Reiki healing, I'd be a rich guy. And it's like, the idea is like, so these things are there. If the aliens can cure people of different things, and if people can cure people then there is a method. And so just because you get it and you die in this lifetime, this is the eventual thing, that the beings can do this. They can cure people. They can make long lifetimes, whatever, but it may take us a while, but you've got to change your attitude. It's not like they're going to come in and do your homework for you. You cannot do your kid's homework. The kid will learn nothing. He will never advance. So that's where they said to the Canadians, unless it's a nuclear war, we will allow the human race to stew in its own juices, because that's how God, I always used to say, that's why God created pain. He created pain for a reason, and that's to get your attention, that when you have pain in your leg, it says, go check the doctor. You may have a cancer. You may have a broken leg. That's why you have the pain, is to stop you from walking on it. And everybody wants to be the victim. It's like, oh man, this is terrible and stuff like that. And instead of working together and realizing that you may have something to do with it, and if you change your attitude and your take on the thing, you could actually switch it, because if it's all consciousness, it's coming from consciousness as well. And that you may have created this situation to teach yourself something, to learn something. And that if you can create it, you can uncreate it.
Yeah. And Reiki is all about learning the symbols, the energy, where the blockages are. It's a primer, but it's not the whole solution. You have to know how to shift energy, move energy, where the pain is, find the pain, remove the pain, shift the energy, remove the blockages. That's more than Reiki. That's experience, and that's knowing how to shift consciousness and energy, how to remove pain, how to alleviate pain. It took me 8 years beyond Reiki to learn how to do that. Reiki was just teaching, how do you sense energy? That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than that. It's very like, oh, there's 4 levels of it. It's so, you know, you're an instant healer. No, you're not. You
Yeah.
have to learn to shift energy to do the healing.
Yeah. So we've made some progress in the last 100 years. People will say it's, you know, it's pretty grim, but I would say in terms of healing and understanding consciousness and all this kind of stuff, I think we've come a long way. And we don't have to learn it because we've got multiple lives. We have eternity. We don't have to learn it tomorrow. We move along, and we have made some progress. Because we always want to look at today, and we want it like the Western idea is, I want everything and I want it yesterday. Like, give it to me now. Cure me now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to go through a couple of lifetimes to learn this lesson. And we sort of like, it's about getting stuff. Yeah, almost even in the spiritual world, I call it spiritual capitalism, where people, it's sort of like, oh, we need some more. We got the 2 cars and the house and the 2 kids, and now we need some spiritual stuff. And it's like, let's go to a seance and watch them and talk to the dead people. And it becomes this sort of thing. It's just another thing we attach to it, instead of understanding that we came here for a reason. Why are we here on earth? It is not to grab stuff. And the old joke was about Howard Hughes. How much money did Howard Hughes leave? He left it all. You got to realize this. You don't own anything. You don't have anything. You are here for a lesson, to learn something, and you got to figure it out. And once you come to that realization, I'm probably here for something, then you start the process, which may be a long process, of starting to try to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing with my life?
Yep, exactly. I'm like, honestly, as a kid, as a teenager, young adult, I used to care what's the newest, latest car, what's the newest computer, the cell phone. Now I don't care. The cell phone is just to help me talk. The car is just to help me get around. My house is just a place to live in. It's not all about the latest and greatest. Whatever you have, work with whatever cell phone you have. You don't have to go and buy the newest cell phone that's $2,000. If you get a cheaper cell phone, you can still talk on it. It's just because they make something better doesn't mean it's actually better. It still has the same function. It just looks more glitzy, more glamorous.
See, that's the ego. The ego always wants to attach possession. Like, it's about things, and you're successful the more stuff you have. It's a materialistic paradigm. And when you see what the beings are, this non-materialistic paradigm, you realize, like, no, this is not. It may make you feel good for a little while, but everybody gets into that thing that you are. That's why people want to be doctors and lawyers, because you're going to make a lot of money, and it's not so much you want to help people. And everything in the modern world is attached to what you have, and it's getting sort of a little bit worse all the time. And we are the balance point to that. We are the ones that shift it the other way and say, no, it really doesn't matter what you have. It matters what you do with what you have, and that you're going to leave it all behind. And the beings are giving us these messages, and if they pick it up, they pick it up. The message isn't for everybody. You put the message out, and the people who need it will hear it, and it will eventually evolve, and we will just do our part. We may have to come back 4 or 5 more times to get more of our message out, but just do what you can with what you got, and remember who you are, that you are not someone who's here to gather toys. How many toys can you get? I always call it rape, pillage, kill, and steal. Whoever's got the most toys when they die wins. That's the mentality we have today. And the ends justifies the means. So if I can get away with not paying taxes, I'm getting away with not paying taxes. It's the end justifies the means. I'm here to get as much as I can, and it really doesn't matter who I got to step on or who I got to walk around. I'm going to get it. And so that's the balancing, where that's going to balance against what we're doing. And one side we're either going to go one way or the other. And hopefully we go with what you and I are putting out in this idea of working together as one, of the environment, of treating all creation, all animals as part of the system, and it should move us around. So I'm just glad I got to play the game. I try to say thank you as much as I can every day that I got to play and realize what's going on, because once you realize what's going on, you feel, you know, kind of special that you got to play this role when most people live lives of quiet desperation and have no clue what's going on.
That's so true. Can I ask you a question? What's your favorite contact modality out of the 70 or ones that you've explored?
Well, the ones that I used, the one was daydreaming. So I do a lot of that. I'll do walking. I'll do when I wake up in the morning. When I meditate, but I always have problems with meditating, is I usually get an inspiration like just when I sit down, and it's almost like there's a story told about a guy who got a music, like a lot of musicians will get songs instantly in their head, and the one guy was on the LA freeway, and this song, he's a famous musician, I can't remember his name, but he got a song in his head, and he goes, "Really? Can you not see I'm on the LA freeway? Come on, do you think I can write this down right now? Come on, if you're gonna wait, I'll pick up the song when I get home. Otherwise, go," and he names some other musician. "Go to this guy, give him the song. I don't want to." So the daydreaming thing, and then when I looked at all these things, I was so interested in psychedelics. I could see that psychedelics is going to change the world, because you have these dramatic 80%, depression, people who have untreatable depression, 80% success after 3 years, 80% on smoking, just these unbelievable. And it comes with this idea that this what I call breakthrough. That's my new book is called Breakthrough, where you actually break through into the noetic, into the nirvana, the samadhi state, where you get out, and you need a sort of a high dose to do that. When I'd never tried anything like that, and I said, I'm going to try this. And then I did it, and I was like, wow. And it's a different type of download than I get with the sort of the walking, or the when I sort of walking, the daydreaming thing, but all my downloads all deal with the same thing. Like in the psilocybin, at least the last 12, I'm dealing with what I would call a force. I'm interacting with what I call a force. I'm not sure what it is. It doesn't have any shape or form or whatever, but I can interact with this thing. But everything that I deal with, and I guess you sort of build your own world, what your intention are, because I don't get anything. I only get one thing, and that is the nature of reality. And I go through, and that's all that it talks about. So I've been fascinated in that, and I'm still going to do a number of sessions. I'm on book 2, and the book 2, I remember the book 2, to give you an idea how these sort of noetic things work with me. The book 2, I said, I'm going to call it the Super Bowl. The first one is called Breakthrough, breaking through into the field, where you actually break through. The ego gets crushed, where you die. They force you to die, and you see this, horrible thing happens, and you die, and then suddenly you're in the field, and suddenly you're in this nirvana field, and you're interacting with whatever. And so then the first book was called Breakthrough, and the second one, I said, this is so fantastic with the stuff I was getting. I said, I'm going to call it the Super Bowl. And this voice comes in my head, and it said, of course it's called the Super Bowl. What the hell else would you call it? And so I get those things. I get those a lot, where I'm just going along, and suddenly this will come into my head. Those are my 2 best ones. I've tried a lot of stuff. Like I tried lucid dreaming. I tried for years of lucid dreaming with, recording the dreams and all these protocols that were done at Stanford. I could never do that. The meditation, I can be completely still in a meditation, because I've got an app. I've got one of these Muse apps and I can be like 20 minutes. I can be out of the zone for 20 seconds, in the zone for except everything for 20 seconds. And yet there's no ideas coming to me. There's no sort of inspiration, but those are the 2 big ones. The psilocybin, which only started maybe 9 months ago. I said, I've got to try this thing. I've got to do this. And it's a different type of thing that I get. The downloads I got have led to books in terms of, the one I had in 2012, I've written 4 consciousness books now. And then the one in 2017, which I still got to write, that's the one where I got the 24 things, where it basically said, is the world this, or is it this? Is it this, or is it this? You think it's this, it's actually this. You think it's this, it's that. And they were coming into my head, and I'm madly, and then I'm in Winnipeg, so it's a cold place. And it was cold. It was like late November or whatever. And I'm going along, and I take the glove off, and I knew, write this down. I'm writing it down, and then it calms down, and it sort of goes away. And I go, oh, okay. Put the paper and the pen back in my pocket, and I'm walking along, oh, it's coming back again. Take the glove off. And it's that kind of thing. So I get really dramatic, or somehow I actually get in terms of bizarre, and you probably get this too. Like I had 2 books that came out of messages from aliens, from experiencers. I had Chris Bledsoe, the famous experiencer from North Carolina. He phoned me up the one time and he said, because he had a real bizarre experience at his house with his dog. And so I knew it was the real deal. And then he phones me about a year later. He says, I got a message from the Guardians. His beings are called the Guardians. They got a message for you. I said, really? You got a message for me from the Guardians? That's cool. I said, what is the message? And that's when he said, the message is in the music. And I went, oh, well, Christian, maybe talking to the wrong guy. I don't listen to music. I'm not interested in music. I couldn't care less. He said, oh, yeah, one song you should listen to is Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. And I said, whatever. You might as well stop talking. And he said, oh, and the other song you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And I went, Neil Young? This is how they drag you in. He goes, Neil Young? Neil Young is involved in this thing? And he said, yeah, Neil Young, After the Gold Rush. Listen to the song. And I said, Neil Young, I live in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's the one place in Canada that even people in Canada don't want to visit. And I go, Neil Young grew up in Winnipeg. It's like, Neil Young's involved. So I look, and if you've seen the lyrics in After the Gold Rush, it basically talks about this environmental thing, that we're treating the world like a gold rush. And when the gold is gone, the silver seed, it's going to become a ghost town, and the silver seeds are going to come and they're going to take the chosen ones to another planet. That's what the song's about. When I saw that, and then I realized all these experiencers, Patti Smith, all these famous singers that are experiencers had sung the song. And I go, oh, this is, and so I did that. And that became a book. And then I had another one where I'm going to Mount Shasta, where an assistant of mine who used to edit my books would say, come, they're Latinos, said, come to Mount Shasta and meditate for world peace on the mountain. And I'm going, okay, whatever. I said, I got nothing against peace. I got nothing against meditation, but I don't think I want to drive three days to California to meditate on the side of a mountain. And she kept bugging me. And I said, well, she helped me out. I'll go sit on a mountain and meditate for world peace. And then I'm going across the desert with one of my other assistants, Desta. We're going across the desert heading for Reno. And then she says, hey, I got a phone call, and it's Katerina, the first girl. She says, I got a message from Aunt Terrell. Aunt Terrell's the alien at the mountain. It says, Aunt Terrell wants you to know there's going to be a program sighting Saturday night and stuff like that. And I go, get the message. What's exactly the message? That turned out to be 2 books. So I get those things where I get messages from other people, and I just sort of go with whatever it is. Or synchronicities is another big one where you get a synchronicity. So those are the ones, the daydreaming and the psilocybin stuff. That is incredible, but you got to be very careful in using that, because it's the old idea. Your attitude that goes in, let me guarantee you, you take the wrong attitude in there and you are going for something you can't even believe how bad it can get. You got to have the right attitude and understand and use the right protocols and stuff like that. But once you're in, you are definitely in the field. There's no doubt that you're in a nirvana state that you can't even describe with words. Yeah,
for me, I'm always open and tapped into the universe, into the field. There's no specific things I need to do or prepare. It's just frequency, vibration. It's tapped into the field. I talk to different ETs. I get messages from the universe, from the Akashics, from whatever I want.
Yeah.
I'm open to it. And so it's there. There's no special anything that I use, and channeling is organic for me. Nobody taught me channeling. It just turned on.
Yeah. And you find out that the more you do it, the more you do. I found sometimes it actually gets in my way in the last little while. It's like I'm in the field all the time. Like things are happening and you're sort of like stuff's coming in your head, and you're not really like I don't really drive a car that much anymore, because when you're zoning out and you're driving a car, it can be kind of dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple of things I've sort of stopped doing, because I'm sort of in the field almost like you all the time, where stuff's coming in your head, or you're like today when I woke up and I had no idea where I was or who I was or whatever. And that's the thing, is that the more you do it, the more you're able to break into the field. You're able to be in that world rather than this world. But it does have its drawbacks, that it's hard to be in the physical world when you're sort of zoned out, when you're thinking about other things.
No, I've got it 50-50. I've balanced that I'm in this world. I'm not floating on the clouds up above. And it's just, it's controlled downloads and uploads and information vibration.
That's good.
And sometimes ET's like, well, go to this guy. He's the DNA guy. I'm like, huh? He's the researcher. He's the DNA guy. Go to him. Okay. Yeah. Then I contact you. I contact somebody else, because they're they're all psychically knowing something that you're doing, projects that you're working on. Those ETs know what everybody is doing on this planet. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go talk to Grant about this, whatever.
Yeah.
The guy was just channeling. He said, go to him because he's doing something that connects you to him. So I went to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the way you do it. And that's, you got to believe your instinct or your feeling that you're leading yourself or you're being led, rather than using the rational. Because what happens with the left brain that always wants to get in the way is, like, if you get say if you're under hypnosis, or if you get a thing, the left brain will say, it's crazy, yeah, come on, that never happened. It's like, it's trying to talk you out of it and trying to say this is all nonsense. You got to go with your right brain, your instinctive feeling that you will be given when you need the stuff. You will be given stuff, and go along with what's coming to you.
Yeah, and what I was told about the DNA stuff, that was interesting. Wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but it had its reasons and its purposes. So it was quite interesting and exciting. So I'm happy with what that was.
Well, you're talking about the test we did. So and then COVID has sort of thrown that thing to the side. I was actually just talking to Leslie Kane, because Leslie Kane is working with a big physical medium, and I was telling her, she didn't get it. And I said, this is important stuff, because she had, like, a brother die. So it's sort of like, if your brother dies and then he comes and takes over a channel and takes over the body, I mean, if the DNA changes to your brother, I mean, you may not have your brother's DNA, but when you take a look at the readout from 23andMe or whatever company you're using, you're going to see all your relatives on the readout. And you don't think that's good evidence? I mean, like, what's all my relatives doing on and so COVID, we had a number of others. We had yours, we had a number of others, but it's hard getting the idea across to people of exactly why this is so important. But we still have some that are set up. But one of the things that was important with yours is it showed that these tests can be very accurate, because you'll hear this thing, you can take your dog's DNA and it'll come up, it's like, and yours was pretty accurate. I mean, both ones were exactly the same, which indicates that it's a blind test, because that's the important thing, that you send it as a blind test, so the company doesn't know who they're testing. It's not like we say, okay, we got these two tests, we want you to compare them or whatever. Then you're corrupting the data. So I'm encouraged with that, and it's a matter of time where if we get a second one, it's a second white crow, and then I think everything changes. But then I guess there'll still be people who will say, no, it's hoaxed, or people will fight back. The left brain, rational, analytical, skeptic things will.
And the dude that I was channeling, Zagor, he's reptilian insectoid hybrid. He said that he's been on many planets, Earth-like planets that are cloned, and that his DNA would be South American. I'm like, no DNA came up South American, but he said it could. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, this is just a test. It's there's no right or wrong here. So I'm like, it didn't come up as South American, but that's okay.
Yeah, you just keep. That's what I said to Leslie Kane. I said, for $250, why would you not run this test? Like, what else are you going to do that's going to be more? Because I mean, it's a high risk thing that it may not work, but if it works, the whole world changes. So I appreciate you're doing it, and we've had we had one where she didn't go. She had the test, but she had the kits, but she didn't, for whatever reason, do it. But it's a matter of time, and we'll do that. But you, like me, have all sorts of things. It's not you're going to rely on one thing to come through. You have all sorts of stuff that you're working on, and you just go by your feeling. Okay, do this now, do not. Yeah, and that's the way I've worked. It's like I didn't intend to write a book on psilocybin. I didn't intend to have a UFO experience. I didn't intend to have a download. I didn't intend to any of this stuff. But you go with it when it goes. It says take this road, and you take that road, and you follow your feelings, and it leads you where you're supposed to go.
Well, yeah, and for me, that genetic test, it was beyond what just the experiment was. It was a gift, because I remember being in Atlantis, a geneticist. I remember playing with DNA, working with DNA. So for me, I didn't know that Ancestry allows you to work with raw DNA. So I downloaded it and I put it into the genetic genie. And I've always wondered, why does my father express aggression so much? Why do I sometimes get aggressive? It's because we have that MOA-A warrior gene. It's active, both my father, my mother, and me. So it's triple active. That's why it expresses itself, because genes express themselves sometimes in behavior, and it's the methylation gene. So I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I got to find out, like, because Ancestry doesn't do health DNA, it only does the ancestry, but you could use raw DNA to work with health stuff. So for me, that was an interesting side stuff that I found out that I didn't know about. So I'm like, okay, so that's why this is the way that is.
Yeah. You learn something from everything. It's you got to go through it, because the left brain will say, nah, don't try it. That's what Leslie was doing. It's like, no, well, but we know, like they know how DNA works. And it's like, and I didn't say, but I mean, the end result is, the same people who say they know how DNA works also say they know how the mind works. And you're crazy. You're not talking to beings. You're going to realize who you're talking to, that you just go with your feeling. And you got to realize it's something that we don't have everything figured out. We don't have all the right blocks. And that when you try something new, you may find out a block that we need and say, hey, this block fit this thing in, and it'll help us, along explaining what's going on. So you and I are in the leading edge, and I feel, honored to know you and to be part of this thing that I got to play. To me, it's always the same thing. It's like, man, I got to play this game. Like, wow, this is so cool. I mean, I could have been an untouchable in a junkyard in Calcutta, and I got to do this. I feel like so honored that I got to play the game. And when you're on the field and you realize you're in this big game, well, I want to play the best I can. I don't want to just goof around.
Yeah, and I love experiments. For me, there's no right and wrong in what the results are. So this for me was fantastic, because Zagor said this Grant is doing something about orbs, and he's also talking DNA in this Zoom conference. You need to go and watch that, and you need to contact him now, because he's doing this now. So I'm like, okay, Zagor, I will go ask Grant. And I ask you, and you're like, yeah, I'm trying to work with several people to do this thing that I'm working on with DNA. I'm like, would you like to try it? I'm like, yes, Zagor said to try it. So here I am.
And I appreciate it, because now we've been shut down by COVID. We were going to do a physical medium, and Bashar has still agreed to do it. But again, with the COVID thing, and that's the way it is. So we'll wait until it all comes. Meanwhile, you do something else. So we'll see where it goes. And if you'll still be part of the big story. I mean, if it does break, I mean, where we do get a second result, then you're part of this story, that you were the first one to actually go down the road and try to confirm this thing. And that's what you're trying to do. You're just trying to confirm it. You don't know 100% what, where it's going to go, but you do the best you can with what you got. And almost like Bashar said, you live at your highest expectation without any idea about how it's going to turn out. Not you need it to turn out. You just go with it, live at your highest your highest excitement. And that's what you and I are doing.
Yeah, and my father always said, you're not my daughter. You're too different. You don't really look like me. But I am his daughter, because the genes say 50% Jewish. And from all the countries where our ancestry comes, like, we knew where our ancestry was. So for me, it's not really about ancestry in that test. It was about something much higher power that I didn't even understand, that I now do. The ancestry showed up exactly as what we have on our family tree. There's nothing special about that. It's far more in what you're working with. That's important. It's not even ancestry. It's something different in there. But channeling works, and beings come in, and it's energetic, and energy connects to DNA frequency as well. That's what I learned. So I think what Zagor said to contact you, that was all true. Like, the facts what Zagor said. Contact him. He's doing this thing on Zoom. Look it up. It's more than just orbs. So I didn't like, okay, it's time. So ETs often lead us to other people, to work with other people.
Exactly. Yeah. And now I'm, I think we're farther ahead of the game, and I appreciate, your efforts to do it, because it sort of encouraged me that we could get people to do it. And I still think it'll come forward. What did your father say about the DNA? Have they done their DNA, your mother and father, in terms of family tree and stuff like that?
No, they don't want to do a test. For them, they know who they are, and they're like, we know that you're an ET human hybrid. You just sparkle it. Like,
Yeah.
we know what you are, and we know what we are, because they have their family tree down to a T, who the relatives are, who the ancestors are. Poland, all of those countries, Russia, Ukraine, all of those countries exactly popped up in the ancestry DNA, exactly as my father and mother always said, where they came from. There was nothing super new about that.
Yeah,
Because,
well, that's encouraging that we can rely on the test, that it is, it's fairly accurate in terms of, so if it does come up, we get one that's different, then they can't go back and say, well, this stuff's a bunch of junk, they don't know what they're doing or whatever. No, they do know what they're doing. I mean, your test proves they know what they're doing, because we had 2 independent tests that they didn't know what was going on, and they both came up the same. Yeah, because ancestry, they don't ask whether you're male or female. 23andMe tests the female and the male allele. So that's different. But again, if you're male, you're male, you're female, you're female. When the entity comes in, something should be different about the ancestry. Something has to be different, perhaps. Or it's just, it's, and science always evolves and genetic tests evolve. So they're constantly changing. So it's about, I believe in your experiment, and more people should try it. Yeah. Well, we'll get it done. Same as epigenetics. I mean, 30 years ago, it was this idea that your DNA is locked and you can't change it and stuff like that. Now we know about epigenetics, that what you think and what you do influences, what gets turned on, what gets turned off, and that kind of stuff. So we're evolving, and you just go what you can. It's like playing the game. It's like, you don't know which plays are going to work. You just go and you enjoy the fact that you get to play the game, and it's exciting. And enjoy the trip, and do the best you can. Yeah, I mean, that I think genetics were always at the top of my fascination list, because I work with ETs, with genetic stuff all the time. So it was about having a dream come true, really, trying this out and doing this. I just didn't know that you were doing this. That's the thing. And so Gore's like, he's the one, go to him. That's good. So I listen, I keep an open mind to what the ETs have to say and what comes through in the channeling. And if it sounds pure, and if it sounds like a good vibration, then I'll follow up with it, because I use my common sense as well. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. So thank you so much. That was an honor. It was an honor to have done this with you. I appreciate your getting me started. You're the first. You're the first on the path, and when it becomes known, you were the first to volunteer and to get it going. So I appreciate that. Well, for me, genetics is about learning and experiencing, and I believe that our own DNA is our own. Nobody hijacks it. Nobody takes it. Nobody can clone us from it. Nobody can take it away. I don't believe that somebody could take my DNA and use it for something that they're not supposed to. It was just a lovely DNA test. It was what it was supposed to be. And I believe my DNA is safely stored where it's supposed to be. It's not being used for anything that it shouldn't be. So I'm not afraid to try genetic stuff. Beautiful. So for me, it was about doing the test and seeing what comes out. Simple as that. Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much. That was fun and exciting. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I agree. And thank you for coming on the show and talking about your beautiful contact modalities and other interesting experiences that you've had. Okay, maybe we can do it again sometime, and something else, because I've always got something new going on, and you've got stuff new going on. I appreciate you having me on and being interested in what I'm doing. Yeah, you are very prolific. You were in the first one in the UFO community, so your books are ranked up there, like, because you're the grandfather of UFO stuff. People, when I mention your name, people are like, he's the UFO guy. I'm like, he didn't start out as a UFO guy. He's a researcher. I'm like, we remember him as the UFO guy. I'm like, okay, go look at his stuff. He has so much information. It's orbs,
spirituality.
Yeah.
UFO is just one part of it. There's so much more.
Yeah.
I'm like, go read contact modalities because that's so interesting.
Yeah. And that's the
So
thing. That's the thing. You just follow your inner hunches, because none of that stuff I intend to do. I never thought I would ever do what I'm doing or that have these experiences. And so I'm honored to have been led by different things and had these experiences and stuff. And so I appreciate the fact that you've picked up. I think a lot of people picked up on the contact modalities because a lot of people are doing one of those modalities. And so we had to cut it down. We could have done probably 800 pages, but it just was getting so long in terms of the different modalities. And I even discovered a couple since the book came. If you've heard, there's a guy by the name of you might want to talk to Mark Sims, who's doing C6, where they're using radios to talk to beings. Fascinating stuff. I had them in the book, but it was all top secret then. I'd heard that these guys had these radios and that they had learned this contact modality of sending signals, stuff like that. I learned that one. And the other one I learned was this thing about a lot of it is deprivation. So a lot of contact modalities, you have trauma, the things that rip the filter, like trauma and deprivation is one, like fasting, float tanks and stuff like that. And the one I'd never heard about until after the book was one they use a lot in Thailand, where they use complete no light, that they're in a dark place for 12 days and they're in this house. And after about 5 days, they start having these, encounters and stuff like that. And they do a lot of meditation and stuff like that. And so you start to realize there's all these modalities. So a lot of people will relate to modalities because whether they're channeling or whether they're, whatever they're doing, they can relate. Oh yeah, let's see what they've got on mind. But we actually had to cut some of them down. We could have done a lot more on examples of these different modalities because so many people are doing them. And it wasn't even my idea. It was Ray Hernandez that had the experience where they pulled him out of his body and said, there's all these modalities. And that's where he used the term contact modalities. And you guys got to quit parsing it. It's all the same thing. It's all consciousness, because you'll get that. You know that. You'll have channelers. I remember I used to have experiencers, UFO experiencers, and they say, don't stick me in with the channelers. I'm not a channeler. Those people are full of shit. I'm not a channeler. Just don't lump me in. And it was sort of like, I'm better than them. My spirituality is better. And it's like, no, you're all the same thing. You may be good at what you're doing, but everybody's tapping into the same field, the same consciousness, and whatever is given to you, run with it. And, but a lot of people still want to believe that, tarot card reading is better than channeling, and channelers believe, everybody believes they're like the one. Their ego gets in the way, and they believe that their modality is the one that works. And what Ray Hernandez would say, you people got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing. It's all part of consciousness.
Exactly. I've tried tarot readings. I've tried psychically reading people just from their energy and their aura. I've tried channeling, and it's all ESP. It's all telepathy. It's just reading people and energy communication. And beings come in through you. You have intuitive channeling. There's so many different types of automatic writing channeling. Channeling is not just one mediumship. It's a lot of different ways of channeling. There's deep trance. There's sometimes where the person is totally out of it and it's just the being in energetically, deep trance. Or there's also channeling where you're half present. You're on the side, but you're fully aware of what's happening.
Even in the book, I talk about the one relationship that we have to multiple personality disorder. And they describe it perfectly because they say there's different levels. So you may have multiple personality where somebody takes over the car and they're driving, and you're sitting in the front seat and they're driving. And then then there's the kind where they put the blindfold and they throw you in the back seat. And then they say, like, there's the trance one, where these people can speak different languages and their body, their eye color changes. It's the same idea, where they say they take you and they throw you in the trunk and you have no idea who's driving the car. So that's this same level thing on personality disorder. And somebody may have 25 different personalities inside their consciousness, and some of them are more strong than others. They sort of know what's going on, and some, they're gone and they have no idea for a couple of days what's going on. The being completely takes over. So that's this idea that you can learn from all these different experiences, but the bottom line is it's all consciousness. People got to realize that this idea that there's the physical world and then there's consciousness is what I was told is no, it's consciousness creates the physical world, the vibration, but it's basically all the same thing. And you've got to quit parsing it, and whatever you're good at, tap into it and use it to make the world a better place.
Exactly. Don't separate channelers with mediums. They're all using psychic ability to one extent or another.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I walk, most of the time the lights are off in my house because I'm light sensitive.
Yeah.
So there's no lights on. It's always dark. So I walk in darkness.
That's good.
And you can turn the light on and like for a couple of minutes, and it takes time to rebalance. But I always get psychic stuff coming in because when it's dark, it's the best time, and at night the best time when information comes in. During the morning, I'm like, there's too much light, I can't do this. So night is better for me.
Yeah. Or you get your visual, like a lot of people believe they live in their head because their visual overrides all their other senses. And so that's the thing I always tell people with psilocybin when people ask me about, how does the protocol, I said, the number one thing you got to do is keep the blindfold on. Do not take the blindfold off, because then you're getting the sensory stuff is coming in. You start seeing stuff and your left brain starts to become active again. And you got to cut it out. So the lack of light is very important, that because you get overwhelmed by what you see and you start to believe that kind of stuff. Whereas you're supposed to sense things. And that's what happens in the psilocybin experience, is you're not really seeing anything. You're sensing everything. You sense this, you sense that. I'm talking to some, and you're getting these visions, but you're not really seeing anything. And that's extremely important. So walking around in the dark, I think, would be a good thing, because you're not getting overloaded by all sorts of visual stimulation that sort of sidetracks you away from what you're actually supposed to be doing.
Yep. And I live 80% of my life in the darkness. The lights are off at the house.
That's good. Yeah.
And at night, because you're in the dark, your senses train you to figure out where all your items are and where all your stuff is. Because blind people, they cannot see light most of the time, but they can sense things, and they train themselves to activate their psychic ability.
Yeah, there's even, I'll tell you a funny story here. If this Mark Sims guy, he had a being, his name is Tejbar, and he was at a Greer event, and he saw this UFO, and then he went and did the C5 protocol in the hotel room, and this Tejbar appears, and he asked him where he's from, and he said, no, I'm not from anywhere, I'm from Earth, from 4,000 years ago. And Tejbar actually gave him this thing. He said, you're too left brain. And left brain is the rational, analytical, ego, and all that kind of stuff. So what you do, he advised him to put a eye patch on his right eye for weeks. So this guy's a business guy. He's walking around with this eye patch because your left brain is runs your right body. Your right brain runs the left side of your body. It's vice versa. So when he puts the eye patch over his right eye, it shuts down his left brain. So the stimulation is not coming into his left brain. And he said after a couple of weeks, he started having experiences just by wearing an eye patch on his right eye, would shut his left brain down. Because Tejbar was saying, you're too left brain. You got to shut your left brain down. It's overactive. And that's one of the ways that he had done it, was using an eye patch. So I tried a little bit, but I find it still a little bit hard in my sort of world. But you're using the same principle, is you're cutting out, same as the float tank. The guy I did the chapter in Contact Modalities, where he's talking to his dead father. And he also I do the float tank modality. And this guy, that's what you're doing, is you're cutting out these senses, because we're overwhelmed by physical senses and sight and smell and stuff like that. And when you can cut those senses off, then you can pick up on the signal. And with the idea is that the left brain and the visual stuff is creating so much noise that you can't pick up the signal. So if you can shut down the inputs, all the left brain stuff, and shut that all off, then you can pick up the signal, and the signal's there for everybody to hear. But because you're so overstimulated by visual stuff and by your ego, you can't pick up the signal. All you're hearing is the noise.
Yeah, and when I'm doing psychic readings, I always automatically want to just shut my eyes and go into the darkness.
Yeah.
And it's easier to pick up the field, tap into the field.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to live in darkness. It feels so good to me naturally. I could still see pretty well because I train myself to use very ethical lighting sources. I don't use fluorescence. I don't use anything that distorts the field. So lighting is important as well in your home, in your environment. If you have the right lighting, your brain functions better, and the brain functions better in darkness too.
Yeah. Well,
It
if I
taps.
update the book, I want to maybe update the book sometime with the people in darkness in Thailand. I'll add your story, because that's an important, I think, a modality is that people realize is that there's getting a lot of noise, and it's the noise that's causing you not to pick up the signal. That everybody is adept, the same as you and I, of picking up the signal, but they're overrun by this other stuff that they've got to shut down. And it's so it's not a matter of it's the ability to get in the field. All the information, all the knowledge is there, all the memory. Like, people have this thing about memory isn't perfect. Yes, memory is absolutely perfect. We have these people that have perfect memory that can tell you 30 years ago who was on TV, what the questions were on Jeopardy and stuff like that. Memory is perfect. It's the access to memory that's perfect. Everything's in the field. It's the access to the field that's not perfect. It's learning to access the field, to get out. And there is these techniques, and that's what contact modalities is about. It's saying, when you have a near-death experience, when you have a head injury, that you may see that as a very bad thing, but it may actually be a very good thing when you want to get in the field. Is there's these ways to get in the field that involve a kid at 4 years old having a fever, where they got this very high fever, and suddenly they become psychic, or children who have very tough childhoods who suddenly become psychic and mediums and stuff like that, because they're trying to shut out the physical world. The world is terrible. People are mistreating them. They're being abused or whatever, and they shut out the field, and all of a sudden they're talking to the dead grandmother because they're able to shut the noise off, and because they're trying to shut out the world. And that's what the modality thing is that everybody can do it. Everything's in the field. Everything's perfect. It's the ability to access the field, learn how to access the field. And if you realize that if you got the lights off all the time, if it works better, then that's what you do, is you figure out what works, what doesn't work, stop doing what doesn't work and start doing what does work. And you get better and better at it. And you learn to access the field and get the information that you're seeking.
Yeah. And the body is so alive and sentient in itself. It really knows what feels good for people. For me, lights off feels so wonderful for the body and the senses. So I follow that intuitive guidance that the body gives me.
Yeah.
Because it is a source field too.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So, well, I definitely feel you will be expanding on the book.
Yeah. It was interesting. And again, I never intended to do it. I never would have thought. The only thing that really did was, I remember in grade 12, I used to write people's papers for them, but it was kind of, there you see that it's impression, because I remember the one guy's paper, I was just thinking about it the other day. I wrote the one paper for this John guy, and because he kept failing his English, whatever. So I said, I'll write a paper. I don't want to charge him $10 for it. So I wrote, he still failed. So the teacher just looked at it and said, oh, this is John's paper. He failed. And come on, he failed you? Come on, there's no way he failed you. So I in terms of writing, I'd done some, early, but when you look back on your life, I never would have believed I would be where I am right now and doing the stuff I'm doing. It's just the way it unraveled, and I'm honored to have been it and to have met people like you, because that's the other part of it, is you meet people in this field who are really, really interesting people, and who have stuff that you could learn from and I can learn from, and you share your experience, and the world becomes a better place.
Exactly, definitely. I mean, everything is vibrationally connected. The ETs tell me, when we contact you psychically and we lead you to connect with people, it's all for a purpose. You might not understand precisely why you're being led to this person, but it's so important that you work with them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go contact this person for whatever reason we're meant to work together. Yep. We work together.
Beautiful. I appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And I hope we can do this again soon.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.